My request is to please switch your phones to silent mode and to take your seats. We're just about to start. Hello? Yes. So we're ready to start with our next session. And this is a very interesting session. I've met all three of our speakers in this session. And all three of them come from such diverse and such interesting backgrounds with such specific and inspiring areas of expertise. The session is named Emerging Issues. We are going to be discussing a number of very interesting areas in this. We will be talking about development of domestic commodities. We will be talking about missing pieces in CSR. We will also be talking about leadership and growing business. Hello? If I speak loud enough, I think I'll be audible across the hall. All right. Is this better? Okay, okay. So, yeah, I was saying that we're going to be listening to some very interesting topics. And this is the right time for this session because we want all of you to be awake, be alert, not dozing off. So for sure, these three speakers will keep you highly engaged, highly interested. So it is my absolute pleasure and honor. I was introduced to Abdul Qadir Memon Saab, the chairman of Pakistan Mercantile Exchange Limited. It's a personal honor and privilege to be announcing his topic and his speech. He will be telling us about the development of domestic commodities. Abdul Qadir Memon Saab was previously president of Pakistan Tax Bar Association and now serves as the patron. He was also president of the Karachi Tax Bar Association. He is a fellow of the Institute of Taxation and Management of Pakistan, also director of Institute of Financial Markets of Pakistan, member of Alternative Dispute Resolution Committee formed by FBR, and member of Policy Advisory Board of the FPCCI. Sir, welcome to the Future Summit, and we're all ears for your session.
Thank you, madam. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear Asfar and the team of the Nutshell. First of all, at the outset, I would like to thank you, Asfar, to you and the entire team for providing this very wonderful opportunity, standing before this very august gathering of professionals, businessmen, the local and global players in this hall. Ladies and gentlemen, today I will be talking about the big picture for development of commodities in Pakistan, the country which is richly endowed with the resources, manpower, intellect and beauty, and I would say the paradise on earth. I'll try to highlight the economic landscape of Pakistan, the significant opportunities, challenges, way forward made or initiatives taken by the Pakistan Mercantile Exchange for development of domestic commodities, increase export, and generate employment in this sector. I have been given 15 minutes and I'll try to wrap up this within the 15 minutes, inshallah. Okay, no problem. I would like to express my apology if I would be repeating, some of the information which you are already hearing since the last 2 days. I know that number of information has already been presented to you by the number of very learned speakers before. And maybe I would be speaking the same information, because please apologize me in advance for that, As we all know that the economic landscape of Pakistan, we are the 5th most populous country in the world. We are the 41st largest economy in the world, and we are the 47th largest importer also in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, our exports are not very encouraging. We are 0.13 of the global exports, although our imports are very substantial, which is $55 billion. And we all know that what struggle we are making, even for the few millions, Yesterday we signed the IMF program successfully. I think congratulations to the caretaker government and its team. But I think this country is full of resources, we need to explore them. Regarding the agriculture landscape, the agriculture is 22.9% of the GDP. We employed about 37.4% of the labor. The area is of about 30.5 million hectares, and it is the 47% of the national land is agricultural land. Our major crop is wheat, rice, and sugarcane, cotton. And this year we are lucky that our cotton will be about 6.5 billion bales, and we will be less importing the about 4 billion cotton bales this year. So we are major producer of the milk. It is also very, heartening, and I'm very delighted to inform that we are one of the largest producers and supplier of food of many crops, rice, onion, wheat, orange, apricot, cotton, sugarcane, mango, milk, and chickpea. We are contribution, the agriculture, we also have commodities which are non-agri, which is a mining, which is a great resource in Pakistan. And that also contributing to the Pakistan, the GDP, 3% of the GDP. The minerals output area is about 6 lakh square kilometers. 92 non-minerals, 52 are commercially exploited with a total production of 68.52 million metric tons per year. And our average growth is 2 to 3% per annum. So you can understand that how potential is there, We are only taking out 2 and 3%, out of our entire resources. Although this 2-3% is now, you can imagine that they are SMEs, about 50,000 SMEs are. So if we are increase our productivity in this area, how many SMEs, will be working on that, and how many employment opportunity will be increased. So our direct employment presently is only 3 lakh workers, and we are the world's second largest salt mines and 5th largest copper and gold reserves in the world. We are the second largest coal deposits in the world. I would skip this slide because it will be on the website, so I would just, for the scarcity of time, I will not be taking your time, but I will be talking about now what the key challenges and the way forward for development of domestic commodities in Pakistan are. What are the key challenges in the agriculture sector? In the agriculture sectors, we require modern technology because we are not applying, we are not, our farmers are not enough educated to use the modern technology. There is a irrigation water is problem. There are 2 problems because one is the fresh irrigation water and another is the wastage of the water. Our irrigation system is presently losing about 50% of the present water actually in the irrigation. We have a low yield. We need to improve our yield. Fertilizer, we need to have a price stability and also the supply. We recently in 2022, everyone knows that we had a climate change impact across our country. The logistic is a problem. We have inadequate infrastructures and logistic. We are, any cow which gives a milk every day, we are not been able to transport the entire milk, and we lost about 33-35% on the way, which is not been used. Then the lower land holdings, we have agriculture lending which is not properly been done. And then awareness is not disseminated. We are working in the PMEX and we know that how many awareness sessions we are doing, but still it is nothing. It is just a peanut. We need to have a law research. Our agriculture universities, the famous agriculture universities are actually now going back. Instead of, we have more agriculture universities. And then the crop insurance also. What is the way forward? The way forward is the federal and the provincial government must focus, and there is a focus has come recently by SIAFC. We should build the run of the river. At least we cannot build the big dams, but we can build the run of the rivers. And according to the one estimate in the Sindh only, if we could build the run of the rivers dam, it will be able to feed the entire water of the province. Then efficient use of the available water, as I said that we are losing 50% of that. Climate resilient, what the world has been done. The world has made, for such climate, they made a insurance, risk insurance, estimated, calculated risk insurance, and that way, we can take care of such losses also. Use of the agriculture machinery, we can have a private sector investment. With the borrowing, the agriculture cannot be flourished, cannot be. There has to be an equity injection in that, and equity injection will actually promote the agriculture sector. Then I talked about already the research. The farmers financing I will talk about through the EWR. I will, these are the PMX and the SCCP initiative. I will talk about that also. Effective and timely pesticide, we need to have a effective seed law. Currently the seed law is monopolized by the government of Pakistan. There needs to be amended, and it has to be amended in a way that the private investors should also have a say and the part to play in that. The availability of power and the cost also. In the non-agri sector, ladies and gentlemen, we need to also have some way forward. As I already said, the federal and provincial focus needs to be there. If you remember that the SIFC, they hold the first meeting, first conference ever, that was on the mining. It was held in the Islamabad, and the world bigger, mining players, they were there, and the barracks also started, and recently the law has also been amended, in the income tax laws have been amended, whereby the RICO-DEC has also been incorporated, and now the 16 years before commercial dispute has been resolved by amendment in the tax laws. Then the sufficient infrastructure, access road, utilities in the industrial zone is desirable. I must say that, if the time would be permit, I will share the story of the Malaysian development, MIDA, actually, when they formed in 1987. If the time will permit, I will definitely share that story also. Then we need to have a latest machinery, access to the finance. I know that, so time will not permit, I know. Okay. So now I will talk about the PMX, what Pakistan Mercantile Exchange has taken the initiative. So the first, for the local domestic commodities, what we have done, this is an excellent initiative taken by the ACCP, and the Pakistan Mercantile has implemented that. In this way, there is a centralized collateral management company has been formed, whereby that company is looking after the warehouses, whereby the farmers can bring their goods, and they have three options. The first option is that they can keep their goods there, and whenever they want to sell it, they can sell it. The another option is that they can bring the goods, they can keep there, they can get the electronic receipt from that collateral management company, and that receipt is available to be kept with the bank, and the bank, he can borrow the money from that. So his farmer's goods is there, and then he is satisfied, he has taken whenever he wants to sell it. The third is that he keep the goods there, and he bring the EWR to the PMX, and we on the electronic platform sell this receipt across the world, locally and globally. I will straight away jump on the next one. I will not talk about the advantages of this, but I will talk. Another initiative which has been taken by the Pakistan Mercantile Exchange is that we form a subsidiary company. And that subsidiary company, whereby we have built a global commodity trading platform. On this global trading platform, this is a e-commerce, it is for the agri and the non-agri, and whereby any person who can bring their goods to our godown, we will have the inspection of that, and it will be put on our electronic platform, and this will be across 162 countries of the world. These goods will be available to the buyer. For example, if somebody is bringing a chrome ore to our platform, electronic platform, and if as I gave you example, if the China is buying from Pakistan $70, and they are selling on $135 from some of the country. But if you bring it to the platform of global commodity, you may get the best price, maybe $100, maybe $80. So this electronic platform will actually provide an opportunity to those people who are not been able to export their goods directly to the buyers. So this platform will be given an opportunity to almost 160 countries of the world. This will also minimize the key features of our this program is that it's bypass traditional trade finance system. There will be no letter of credit, nothing at all. The State Bank has given a special permission to us, and by doing that, at least the 15 days for export will be cut down. It will be seamless, automated single window solution. It is the state-of-the-art logistics service we all provide, all the logistics, our vendors will provide all the logistics services and everything from the lending to the goods from the warehouse to the reaching the goods to the buyer. So worldwide delivery, there is a very competitive prices. As I has already said, there is no documentation, nothing at all. The shipment cycle is seamless. So there is a next chart is the flow chart. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. My presentation ends. And if any questions, I am available in the hall. Thank you very much, all of you. God bless you all.
Thank you very much. That was highly inspiring. Benjamin Franklin once said, well done is better than well said. And it was actually an education for me personally, and I'm sure for a number of people sitting in this hall, the great work, sir, that you and your organization are doing in terms of impact. Now we come to our next speaker. Her profile actually struck me as being very extraordinary. And my fellow summit moderator, Shaha, also felt the same way. So I'm personally looking forward to listening to our next speaker. She's a self-sustainability pioneer. She has been called the United Kingdom's leading self-love expert. She's considered as a pioneer in her field. She is the founder of the Transformation Self-Love Therapy. She teaches soul reading and self-actualization. She is also an ambassador for Alala Charity for Orphans of War and Natural Disaster, to which she regularly donates profits from her books and courses. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Tara Love Perry. She will be talking about the missing piece in CSR and performance potential.
Yes, I have it. Thank you. Distinguished participants, esteemed guests, fellow speakers and visionaries, dear Asfar and the Nutshell team, beautiful souls, salam alaikum. Thank you for gracing this important and noble event with your presence. It's truly an honor to stand. Can you hear me? Is that okay? Yes. It's truly an honor to stand before you and share my thoughts on a matter that transcends boundaries and speaks to the core of our very existence. I came here to delve deeper into the profound theme of peace and our collective journey towards it. I came here to call for peace in our time. I invite all of you for just one moment to close your eyes and with your hands on your heart, take a deep breath and just feel a moment's gratitude for this gift of your life and give thanks. I believe that peace in our time is possible. Peace, although an elusive concept in a world rife with conflict, is the cornerstone of our shared aspirations. As I stand here before you, I echo a universal yearning, a desire for peace that will transcend borders, ideologies, corporate and personal ambitions. The question is simple yet profound. Who in this room does not wish for peace? Beyond a mere wish, I believe in our collective power to transform this desire into a reality, a thriving, sustainable world where genuine harmony resides in the hearts and minds of all, for our children and our grandchildren's future. For the 65%, as we've been hearing, of the upcoming population of Pakistan's youth and their future. Acknowledging the immense hurdles and intense challenges that we face is crucial because we find ourselves at a formidable crossroads. Brought about by our ignorance and aversion to rightful responsibility. To effectively move forward, we must confront the fact that peace only seems elusive because we're missing a vital piece of the puzzle. The missing piece is referred to in ancient texts and scriptures, but has been concealed, fragmented, misrepresented, and even vilified throughout history. The consequence of this omission is a world perpetually entrenched in war, destruction, species annihilation, and almost demonic-driven pursuit of power that threatens our very existence. Our technological prowess has propelled us into a prosperous new era, but has outpaced our conscious evolution. Despite the abundance of information, ideas, theories, and theologies, the actualization and implementation of our true potential as conscious human beings remains elusive. This disparity continues to lead us down perilous paths, akin to the musk deer, searching for the source of its own fragrance, unaware that it emanates from within, thus driving itself mad and eventually killing itself in despair and frustration. It's my firm belief that the missing piece, this sacred hidden knowledge, has never before been made to humanity as a whole. Its revelation explains why, despite our proud technological advancements, we still live in a world insatiably consumed by lust and greed, obsessively obscured by money, in a version of reality largely devoid of any real connection and consciousness. This vital missing piece is the quantum key, to awaken our latent genius, unlock our true potential, fulfill our higher purpose, and bring us home to peace. The urgency of this missing piece is starkly apparent when we consider the trajectory of our world as we witness nations beset with conflict, individuals beset with trauma, and societies weighed with issues. The lack of this missing piece has left us chasing our tails, unable to evolve consciously and recognize who we truly are and why we're here for millions of years. Why? The first major hurdle is that peace is not prioritized. The growth of profit is. Only a small but powerful minority profits from war, illness, trauma, and fear. Did they sell us that the pursuit of money over the pursuit of peace is more rewarding? I want to show you that peace and profit are not mutually exclusive. In fact, on the contrary, we can procure both when we prioritize peace. To do that, I believe we must grow up beyond selfishness and service to the few and implement peace as a strategy in service to all, as a matter of corporate responsibility, social sustainability, and inclusive empowerment. The extent of the peace crisis is profound, extending far beyond geopolitical conflicts. By the end of 2022, 32 countries were at war. With the current massacre in Palestine, that number continues to rise. Domestic violence accounted for nearly 25% of divorces. The spectre of serious mental health issues loom over at least half the global population. And did you know that homicide is the second highest cause of death for 15 to 29-year-olds, with the third most highest cause of death being suicide, with at least 10% of our kids and our youth self-harming? Do we want that for Pakistan's young people of 2047? Their loss of hope for a right to their future is unspeakably devastating. And what of the 100,000 children or so that go missing every year? It's no wonder that we have trouble sleeping at night. The statistics, although staggering, fail to capture the full impact. Trauma, both diagnosed and undiagnosed, is spreading like wildfire, affecting individuals and entire communities globally. Unresolved trauma is also inherited through familiar ancestral lines, cultural tragedy and history, and passed down the generations like a baton in a relay race, a heavy burden that we must collectively address. Trauma breeds fear, codependency, disempowerment, loss of purpose, and infernal internal struggles that all too often remain hidden. How many people these days are battling demons inside themselves that no one else knows about, for fear of what other people will think of them or do to them if they knew? How many of us have experienced some sort of trauma in our lifetime? I would say almost everyone in this room, if we're honest. How could we not be traumatized when there are billions of us suffering, being trafficked, slaughtered, living in refugee camps and slums, hiding from terrorist groups, sick, starving, poor, and without hope? And instead of the trauma lessening over time, as the anecdote, time heals tells us, what we must realize is that despite the financial growth and availability of technology, actually the trauma is increasing. We live in a traumatized world full of traumatized people. And unhealed trauma is the real global pandemic. Let's visualize the pervasive impact of trauma. Imagine the Earth as a body and its inhabitants as cells. How much of the Earth is covered with people fighting, struggling, and suffering, visibly and invisibly? If we were to represent traumatized individuals as malignant cells in a body, how much of the body would be cancerous? And how do we hope to thrive and do better and evolve with our technology and AI and planetary sustainability when the real state of the world, this is the big picture, is that level of trauma? At the end of the day, you won't care how much profit you made as you lie on your deathbed, gasping for your last breath. But you will care about how much peace you are in when you go, and how much peace you established in this world and in your communities. We need to be in peace first. You need to be in peace first to make the difference that you came here to make. In the face of such overwhelming decimation, the missing piece emerges as the solution, a solution embedded in the profound energy of love. Love, the energy that permeates all of creation in the form of supreme consciousness, is the bedrock of peace. Now consider the power of love in your own lives. The love for your children, your parents, siblings, the love you have for your work, the love you have for your country, the love you have for your higher power or God. What power does love inspire and motivate in you? What wouldn't you do for the people you love? For me, it's my children. I'd do anything for my children. Who or what makes you feel that way? Is it not love that is the greatest force you have, catapulting you to previously unimagined stratospheric possibilities, potential, and achievement? Love motivates and propels us to achieve the seemingly impossible, pushing us beyond our fears, our blocks, and our limitations. Underneath all motivations, money, power, status, lies a deep-seated desire for love and connection. Understand that success in its truest form is driven by a desire for acknowledgement, validation, and ultimately love. As leaders, pioneers, people of influence, people of power, recognizing this truth is paramount. You wish for people to know who you are. You long to be seen for what you're made of and what you're capable of. You yearn to be heard, your story told and your message communicated. You ache to feel valuable so you can contribute. You pine to feel significant so that you belong. You seek to feel validated so that you matter. You need to feel worthy, that you deserve peace and happiness, albeit sometimes secretly or covertly. And underneath all of that and all of your motivations, you want to be loved without judgment, separation, or condition for just being yourself. But where do you find that kind of love? Who can give you that? It's a lack of love that has traumatized and twisted our perceptions and led us astray. It's a lack of love that drove us in the wrong direction, in a distorted pursuit of power, propelled by our own wounded aspects, simply seeking validation, acceptance, and inclusion. War, as it exists in our external world, finds its roots within the minds and souls of human beings as a severe lack of love. The pursuit of power and the perpetuation of destructive behaviors are manifestations of our collective internal strife. To envision a sustainable peace, we must look deeper than external solutions. We must look to our individual inner environment. We need to change things from the inside out by addressing the root core level to become self-responsible, self-sustainable, and self-loving human beings. With the knowledge and tools to resolve our own internal trauma, inner conflict, and the war within us. And it's us, as leaders, pioneers, and experts, who have the responsibility and the duty and the power to make the biggest impact for change. Because we are the fortunate ones to be sitting here right now, safe, not bombed from our homes, fed, clothed, educated, and caring enough to be able to make that difference that will turn this world around. It's my mission to make this missing piece available on a global scale. And as you might imagine, I've encountered challenges. For those who prioritize self-service over serving others, or power over others instead of empowering others, and those addicted to suffering and addicted to inflicting suffering, this message is instantly dismissed. However, for those of us here in this room who recognize the urgent and obvious need for a new foundation of pure and unconditional love in our world, this message resonates. The missing piece is not an abstract concept. It's the bridge between science and spirituality, between our human condition and our divine potential. It's where unconscious minds and conscious hearts unite, where trauma is healed and darkness yields to light. It is universal quantum mechanic principles. It's free technology. It's the missing piece in your CSRs and your SDGs. It's unconditional love. So I ask, when would you be willing to love yourselves enough to be the love that you seek from the world? In my efforts to facilitate people for self-sustainable peace, higher consciousness, well-being and love, I teach 7 quantum keys. To save time, because I'm running out, I'll share the brief version. Key 1 is the most crucial, and it's the key to self-realization. And I help people access this with a very unique and very quick, effective breathing technique connected with inner sensory perception. Key 5 is the key to evolution. The key recalibrates and repatterns the energy waves and particles of your matter, your beliefs, your emotions and soul memory into a healed and harmonious frequency. Key 6 is the key to self-actualization, where it locks in that repatterned harmony as the new baseline of your reality. And it's very important for actualizing the wealth of your potential and increasing your manifestations, your goals, your desires. 30 years of research from the HeartMath Institute proves a scientific perspective on the power of love. Did you know that the energetic field of your heart, when in a state of connectedness and coherence of love, is 10 times greater than that of your thought field? This remarkable truth underscores the transformative potential of actualizing the higher dimensions of your heart centers over and above your best positive affirmations and good intentions. Moreover, it proves that love is also 10 times more powerful than negative and destructive thoughts, thereby offering the obvious solution to our turmoil. As we navigate the complexities of our world and emergent technologies, let us not lose sight of our true human spirit, the love that defines us. Activating love within for ourselves and others becomes paramount. Each of you, by actualizing and embodying your greater potential through the self-sustainability process, can and must and will become the greatest catalyst for change. Peace in our time is possible. You as individuals hold the power to create a quantum level impact. By embracing the 7 quantum keys into your lives, organizations, schools and businesses, you unlock the potential for inner peace and sustainability for all. Because this knowledge, once internalized, becomes a profound and powerful tool for helping not just yourself, but your families, your friends, your colleagues, your teams, your customers, and your communities to transform their lives from the inside out. You, as change makers, have the potential to create a ripple effect that transcends individual transformation. You will have a quantum impact. And just to wrap up, peace in our time is possible. Imagine the collective power we could harness by uniting with 10 times more strength rooted in the core of each of our being. As leaders, pioneers, and people of influence, the challenge and the choice lie before you. The challenge is to recognize that without a foundation of pure and unconditional self-sustaining self-love, our actions, decisions, and intentions will continue to perpetuate global disaster driven by greedy, lustful, love-lacking ego, and further undermine our evolution by cutting the very branch upon which we sit. Without the foundation of compassion and consciousness, what we've built must inevitably fall back down. Peace is possible in our time, and I urge you, good people and beautiful souls of Karachi, to be leaders in this endeavor, to embrace the choice before you and do something that no other nation has done before, and that is to become self-sustainable as individuals for the overall sustainability and well-being of humanity and our beloved Earth. Make peace with yourself. Resolve the ancestral trauma. Evolve from your conditioning and be in peace for your family and for your country, and fast. Make it part of your corporate social responsibility and prioritize self-sustainable development goals into your model for growth and well-being. Plan for peace. Profit from peace. Peace in our time is possible. And in conclusion, I leave you with this undeniable truth. Peace starts now. Your peace starts now. And let's choose peace in our time. The missing piece is within reach, and your decision to embrace it will not only be life-changing, but dare I say, world-changing. Peace in our time. Who's with me in this room for peace in our time? Can I see your hands? If you are here, Karachi, for peace in our time, you want peace in our time, you believe in peace in our time, you want peace in our time for your children and your grandchildren, let me hear you say it. Peace in our time. Peace in our time. Let your children hear you. Blessings. Thank you. I love you.
Thank you very much, Tara. So several takeaways from this talk, but one that everybody in this room can identify with, especially from the corporate sector, is that peace and profits are not mutually exclusive. So with that, I'll move on to the last speaker of the 9th session. All right, so that is Professor Mark Tyrrell. He is a professor of global strategy at Hult International Business School. He is also the CEO of Oriski. He is a strategist, an author, and an entrepreneur. His company is a consulting firm designing scaling strategies. He also founded Davos, a community based around the side events at Davos during the World Economic Forum. He will be talking about the impact of artificial intelligence on leadership and growing business. Mark? Okay.
I'm an idiot. Does this microphone thing work? There we go. I am an idiot. I'm a very clever idiot, but I'm an idiot. This is very important to start off with. By the way, as we get started here, half full or half empty? Half full? Anybody get any other answers? It's completely full. Because it's half full of liquid and half full of air. It turns out that the optimists are right. So once you stop looking at your local TV shows, you'll realize that the optimists are right. Actually, before we get into my talk, there's another thing as well. So for this session here, you've been here for about 40 minutes or so. In the last 40 minutes that you have been sitting in this room, how far have you physically moved? Meters or kilometers? Anybody got a guess? Sorry? 700 miles. And why is that? So we do 1,200 miles per hour at this latitude, but so we travel at around 1,200 kilometers per hour. So even if you didn't notice it, in the last 40 minutes, you've all gone around 700-800 kilometers. Anybody got a different answer? You've also gone about 30,000 kilometers. Why is that? We go around the sun at around 40,000 kilometers per hour. Anybody get another answer? So we've got around, I think it's 600,000 kilometers, because the galaxy, the Milky Way, travels at 800,000 kilometers per hour. The reason why I'm starting with this bottle, hopefully you'll remember the bottle, and about this thing about time, is that you obviously can't get more real than measurable physical distance. And yet, if you change your perspective, you get a different answer. And what I find fascinating as we talk about, for me, I'll be looking at AI leadership, is that right now a lot will go down to what is your perspective. So if you think you're happy or you think you're sad, you're both right. But let's get into this. And that's as well. By the way, this is my QR code to connect with me on LinkedIn, so that you can all connect with me at the same time, because whilst you exchange lots of business cards, this is better. Because now we have different ways of doing things. Einstein used to teach undergraduate physics at Princeton University. His second-year students would get a bit of a surprise, because when they sat down in their second-year examination, in front of them was their first-year examination questions. Well, eventually, a professor, like a student, will be brave enough to say, well, Professor Einstein, I think you've made a mistake. You've given us last year's questions. Einstein would just smile and say, well, whilst it's true that I've given you last year's questions, this year, the answers are all different. And particularly if we look now, and the topic that I'll be talking about, and particularly in the context of artificial intelligence, which is my focus for now, if we look at just how much difference there has been already in this year alone, and then see what's going to happen next. So, by the way, how many of you use ChatGPT? How many of you are using it right now? But just to give you an idea of the pace of change. So there's a terminology called a prompt, just like asking the gadget to go do stuff. So here are two prompts, and these are sort of pretty classic prompts. One is, make me a picture. So this is an image AI called Midjourney. Make me a pizza slice with pepperoni and dripping cheese, food photography, studio lighting, professional photography, stock image. That's one prompt. Second prompt, a blue bird having coffee with a puppy in Venice, Italy. So let's have a look. Are you impressed by these pictures? Crap, total crap. This is version 1 of Midjourney when it came out, and it is awful. Kind of a scary looking pizza. But what's that? I don't know. This is Midjourney version 5. It came out in March of 2023. And this is now what it looks like. And if any of you have ever done food photography, this is a fantastic picture of pizza, which is unique. It's not picked up from the internet. It has been created on the fly. Let's look at a bit more complicated thing. Remember the bluebird, mangled, garbage, hideous thing? This is a bluebird with a dog and a cup of coffee with a background that probably plausibly could be Venice. But that is not the interesting thing. The interesting thing is that the difference between the shitty version and the good version is only 11 months. Not even a year. There's a company called Character AI that allows you to whatever, talk to celebrities and dead people. This company is now just about a year old. It has 200 million end users, almost $1 billion company. And all it's doing is using these sort of fundamental large language models, these sort of AI for text, and allows you to have chats with them. Crazy stuff. I think the other thing, when you get into it, that makes me very interested is whatever AI goes multimodal. That sounds very fancy, but what it means text, it means audio, it means video, images. In fact, I had done for a previous talk, had my Einstein story translated into Urdu, had put it into phonetic Urdu so that I would be able to speak it and copy it, sounding like Urdu directly. Or I could have used a voice clone. Anybody have done voice cloning before? You probably should know about this, because it's pretty much you take 1 minute of audio of anybody, and you would be able to, you should ask permission obviously, but have that person speak words that they never said, sometimes in languages that they don't speak either. Crazy stuff. But an example about how crazy we're going to get. And by the way, when I look at crazy, this is today crazy. I'm not talking about what's coming next. I'm saying this thing has already been done in 2023. So this is old stuff. So right now, many of you will have seen the Boston Dynamics robot dog. I don't know if you've seen the video of the Boston Dynamics robot dog with ChatGPT. Fascinating. What happens is that robot dog clearly uses AI, machine learning to process go up, go down, how the sensors work. But some researchers decided, wouldn't it be fascinating if we gave the robot dog ChatGPT? Now, it doesn't have internet connection at the time. This was early days. All they gave it then was a microphone, a speaker, and then it gave it access to GPT, and GPT had access to the system's whatever output. But so now it means that before the robot would be loaded up to say, go into the room, find a bucket, come back. But it didn't know what a bucket was. Well, now because ChatGPT has got 15 terabytes of human knowledge, it's read every book by Shakespeare, Cervantes, it just knows a lot of stuff. Now the little robot can go over and say, well, I've had a look. There are 2 buckets. Do you want the red one or the green one? I could carry the green one, but it's full of water and there's a fish in it. What should I do? And all they did was add ChatGPT to an existing system. So what I've become fascinated about is how the thing that concerns me, the big picture thing, particularly in a sort of area like this, is how can you use the sort of artificial intelligence to supercharge individuals? How do you then incorporate it into your products and services? But then also, how do you basically supercharge entire companies with these things rather than just being us, let's say, being professionally more useful? Now, would anybody like some advice on using ChatGPT to do it better? So this is like a quick diversion from big picture to small picture. First thing that I would like you to advise is that when GPT gives you an answer, don't accept its answer. Just say, it's okay, but not very good. Please make it better. Tell me what you've changed, and tell me why you've changed it. That alone will give you dramatically better answers. If you want it to be more creative, one fun thing that I've been doing is that it turns out if you are polite to ChatGPT and are smiling and positive, it will give you better answers because it's using 15 terabytes of human speech and knowledge. It turns out that when people say please and thank you and are respectful, humans behave better. ChatGPT is exactly the same thing. And in fact, for my creative work, what I've often said to GPT is to say, imagine you've had a good night's sleep and you've woken up refreshed, what are your ideas? And it comes up with better ideas. But here we go. What we're looking at here is that I was having an argument with a German professor. And this German professor was convinced that ChatGPT was no better than a spoon and a bowl of ice cream. It is a tool, just a tool. It doesn't know the taste of ice cream, it doesn't know the texture, it doesn't know the flavor, it is just a tool. Well, I wanted to disprove this professor, he was very annoying anyway. But so, to disprove this thing, I decided to make an AI cookbook as an experiment. Have any of you done cooking with ChatGPT yet? You will now, if you haven't done yet. But what I did was I decided to write a cookbook. Now, I've never written a cookbook before. I wrote about 150 pages of the cookbook, including recipes and pictures, in 2 weeks, which is quite fast. But for me, making my cookbook, I actually started off, and this is an app I built as well to do this. I started off by getting GPT to say, please can you invent some countries for me? And it invented countries. It invented the pictures of the countries, the language of the countries, its song, its dance. Very, very good. I then said, well, please can you invent its favorite handheld desserts or snacks or main dishes? And then it invents for each of the imaginary countries an imaginary dish. Oops, how does that work? Did I break it? So now it comes up, it has the recipe, it has the story around the traditional recipe. But then I thought, well, maybe you don't like some of the ingredients. Maybe you'd like to change the recipe. So in this case then, so right now, here's the recipe is put in, and then you can actually talk to the recipe to say, well, can you please make it for 10 people instead of 4, and can you add some exotic fruits? And it changes the recipe on the fly. Imagine looking at a newspaper where for every single person the news stories are different because it fits what they want to see. This is today's stuff. So one of the things that I've been looking at now is, let's say, being a very practical perspective, AI and leadership. Now, I've been doing a number of sessions on teaching executives, mostly in Europe and in Switzerland, particularly in Switzerland, around use of AI. Already I've found that I can't be bothered to talk about ethics, I can't be bothered to talk about privacy and other issues because other people are talking about them. And most AI conversations end up spending 95% of the time talking about trivial little stuff and very little time talking about, say, well, okay, I know, but how do I use it? So we had a customer that we were working with, a federal agency, and they had a challenge because they have 1,000+ employees, and they need to do a number of organizational changes as part of a transformation exercise within their business. Normally, you need to have a training program, somebody has to make it. Then you need to get trainers that are trained on that. Then you need to organize doing the training in different places. All of this takes about 3 or 4 months. But let's get realistic about how organizations work. You know it takes 3 or 4 months, but then all of a sudden we've missed our window to do it this quarter. Then it goes into, I give you 1 day to teach managers, and then it goes down to, I'll give you 1 hour. So we know that it's a 4-month problem, but you've got 1 hour to go do it. Well, what we did for this very first exercise, particularly being playful, is how do you teach managers and leaders to have tough conversations with your staff? Have any of you been taught on doing that? Which is sad that only 2 people put up their hand, by the way. and were you taught or was it learned by doing? Were you taught or was it learned by doing? So what we then came up with is that we began to use ChatGPT and sort of very prompt engineering, it's called, to then work out how to allow employees in organizations to have the perfect conversation with their staff as and when it's needed, in whichever language they wanted, in the personal learning style of the individual. We had one manager, and their personal learning style is that they learned everything by using Star Trek as an analogy. Well, who are we to say this is right or wrong? Now, clearly, as a company, you would never build a training program based on Star Trek for your employees. Terrible idea. However, if you have one manager where for them it's the perfect way of understanding it, it's brilliant. I'll give you another little ChatGPT tip, which I find extremely useful whenever I'm doing extremely complicated things like papers, reports, long documents, things like that. This little tip, you're interested? The little tip then is to say, please read this document, and you can quite often upload the document, but please read this document and explain it to me, and in my case, using cooking as an analogy. So don't go through this gigantic, long, complicated thing. Just give me an analogy of cooking. It allows me to understand things very quickly. But I see then, as we look at this sort of AI evolution, sort of revolution coming in, the technology itself allows us to save money, do things faster. So I'm a capitalist. I would imagine most of you here are capitalists, even if we'd like to be socially minded. And if we could employ 2 people instead of 50, we would normally, outside of certain circumstances, always employ 2. And even if we would like to employ 50, if our nearest competitor only employs 2, we're screwed. So what I see is happening then is that this sort of use of these technologies will become massively widespread, maybe a little bit slower than it looks. But remember, when we looked at the slide, this sort of progress of ChatGPT has all been within less than 1 year, and it can't be stopped. Oops, gadget. But I think the next thing then is that I've shared a little bit of personal stories, a little bit about leadership pieces, because I think there is a huge opportunity on that. Things that we were just not possible to do, we can now do. But I see it fascinating looking about how we can use AI to power business growth. Even to the extent that sometimes you don't necessarily have the right expertise in the room, or you need to have the right ideas, the right concepts, kind of on the fly. How many of you have ever heard of something called personas? So in design thinking, if you've ever had a customer beforehand, you clearly have many customers, hopefully, and your customers are different types. So think of these as target segments, market segments. It's very, very easy in product development. It's easy when you're designing an organization to forget about some of your segments. Misprioritize. We were speaking to a lady that writes press releases in the fragrance industry, but it's very easy to sometimes forget your customer. A nice tip about how do you do business growth is you can have your AI imagine that they are your customers. So please, can you imagine 5 buyers of fragrances? What do they want? What do they like? What are their pictures? If you remember my AI cookbook, I actually have been making the recipes. The first set of recipes that I made didn't taste very good. It got the moisture all wrong and it made a mess. I'm an idiot, and I'm a very clever idiot. So I asked GPT to say, well, how can I make these recipes better? It told me. I then said, okay, I'm still an idiot, and I've never written a cookbook before, because I'm doing something brand new to me. How do I write a cookbook? It told me how. I then said, okay, well, what people work on a cookbook? It told me who they are. So in my cookbook, so now let's imagine my cookbook has, here is the country, here is its traditional dessert. I then have 2 AIs that are pretending to be expert chefs, and they make extra recipes. But it then turns out that those extra recipes aren't perfect. There are issues with them. And my cookbook, I can only have 2 recipes, not 6. So I've now got variants. A very good thing. What then happens is that I now have the AI come up with 5 pretend experts. And these pretend experts are expert on food nutrition, recipe tasting. They then provide their feedback to the 2 imaginary chefs. So now we have a ranked ordered list. Then we get the recipes out. I then have the AIs have pretend conversations with each other. Very, very funny. They're WhatsApp conversations with emojis. We then end up with 2 perfect recipes, and yet that's not good enough. I then have got the AI pretend to be 5 amateur chefs, and they pretend to make the recipes. And they provide feedback on how to improve the instructions, such as it says roll out the dough, but it doesn't say how thick. What that does is that when I did this the first time round, this took me hours. What gets interesting is that when you know a basic bit of programming, a basic bit about how APIs work, I can now do 1,000 of those in 10 minutes. This is a radical change about how things work. And I think what's interesting for you guys now, and by the way, I'm sorry that the icon didn't come out because it was going to be a nice little flag. But if you look at a country like yours, the potential that is here, which has always been here, is still desperately waiting to be tapped. There's a huge power, a huge human potential that is here to be unleashed. It is entirely plausible that an economy like yours, a society like yours, could actually become an AI-powered economy. After all, many of your engineers have already been building the technology that does this, but wouldn't it be nice if you, your families, the citizens were able to take advantage of those benefits? It's going to be tricky. There will be issues. It's important to have education, etc., etc. But for me, I really do see this AI thing as being, first of all, entirely inevitable anyway. But I do see this as offering tremendous opportunities. And with that, please connect with me. This is my LinkedIn thing again. And I'd like to say thank you very much for the invitation, shukran, and to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I think everybody in the hall was listening very intently and trying to think of the possibilities of where this can go and how this can be used. So with this, we've come to the end of our 9th session. Thank you to all our speakers. I'd like to request the 3 speakers to please come on the stage. Kadir Sahab is already here. Tara, if you could please join us on the stage, and Mark as well. We'd like to present tokens of appreciation to the 3 of you. So if you could please have the 3 of you on the stage. Mark? Shazad, can you see where Professor Tyrrell went? Oh, there he is. Okay, right. To give away the souvenirs, I'd like to request Saira Awan, President TCS, to please join us on the stage. Thank you for the clapping. Thank you. Thanks, Saira. Okay, so, yes, over here. So, we're delighted to be presenting to each of our speakers a personal copy of Dr. Ishrat Hussein's latest book, which has been soft launched at our event. We will also be presenting a special gift pack, which is sponsored by Bonanza Satrangi Fragrances, the fragrance partner for TFS 7th edition. Saira, I'd request you to please first present the souvenir to Abdul Qadir Memon Saab. Hi, Mark, over here. Tara, if you would please receive your souvenir from Saira. Professor Mark Tyrrell, your turn, please. Let's gather for the group photo. I request Asfar Ehsan to please join us on the stage for the group photo. Shaha? I think we're going to be as many women as men in this photo. Thank you very much, our worthy speakers. Thank you, Saira. All right, so now this is a power-packed session. This is the closing session of the Future Summit 7th edition, the last session for today and the last session for the conference. So I'll just introduce you quickly to the format of the closing session. This will be going on from now till about 5:15 p.m. First of all, we'll have an online address by the Caretaker Federal Minister for Finance and Revenue, Dr. Shamshad Akhtar. She is, I think, waiting for us online, and she can start her address shortly. After that, we'll have, it's a session titled Talk Amongst Titans. So this will have worthy panelists, some of who are already here. This will be moderated by Ahsan Malik Saab, who's the CEO of the Pakistan Business Council. And then at the end, we'll have a few keynote talks that will not only summarize whatever we've been discussing throughout the conference, but it will also provide some very key insights, some key takeaways on the big picture. This will have addresses by Dr. Moeed Yusuf, by Mr. Mohammad Aurangzeb, President in COHPL, and by General Zubair Mahmood Hayat, ex-Chairman Joint Chief of Staff Committee. So I'm going to now hand over the session to my fellow summit moderator, Shaha. We hope that you enjoy this very powerful session, and we hope that it becomes an exciting and inspiring session for all of you. I'm signing out now. Shaha.
The closing session always carries a lot of weight for us moderators also, because we are sort of bringing together all the learning and all the takeaways from the 2 days of very, very enriched learning. To begin the last session, we already have Dr. Shamshad online, and I wouldn't want to make her wait any longer. Dr. Shamshad is a distinguished development economist, United Nations diplomat, banker, and a politician. Her current role as Caretaker Minister for Finance Revenue marks her second term in the crucial role, having previously served as the Caretaker Finance Minister in 2018. She was the 14th and first ever female governor of the State Bank of Pakistan. Her influence extends globally. She has served as a senior advisor to the Secretary General of the United Nations and as Vice President of the World Bank. She's joining us online, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for us. She couldn't be here physically because of the IMF closing sessions going on, so she's been extremely busy. But we are so grateful for her to take this time out and join us here. We will be delving into now the scientific inquiry of the big picture in the final closing session. Sound desk. One minute? Okay. I'm sure all of you have had a great opportunity to connect with all our speakers, and it's been such an enriched learning experience talking to them, hearing how the world is changing and how fast is it changing. Just this reference to the speed of the stellar bodies through the space. I think that's an eye-opener for all of us. We feel that we are not moving, but we are moving, and we are moving at a pace that is perhaps not even comprehensible. And it kind of sort of puts everything in the right perspective. I was just discussing stargazing with someone, and I had mentioned it earlier, that how the neural network and how the stellar bodies in space are so much a reflection of each other. And now the pace is being matched and the depth is being matched. There's so much to do. There's so much potential. We keep using the word potential, but the word potential only has a meaning once it is understood and utilized productively. Otherwise, we can continue for another 76 years using this word. So the idea and the bottom line is how to make that word change into building of capacity, of our skill, of our productivity. So we have Dr. Shamshad here. Thank you, Dr. Shamshad, for your time. And let's welcome her, ladies and gentlemen. She's taken time out from a very, very busy schedule.
So, distinguished speakers, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure to be a part of the Future Summit by our gracious host, the Nutshell Conference team. I'm indebted to Afsar, who's always been there, and it is because of his convincing power that I am cutting short one of my other meetings to be with you for a few minutes. I have to apologize. I intended to come at the opening and at the closing, but given my commitments here, I can't make it. So let me lay out to you how I plan to offer my perspectives. First of all, I would not do justice if I didn't talk about the present before I go into the big picture of the country, what we need to do, what we ought to move towards. So, as you may all know, the caretaker government has taken a lot of proactive measures to stabilize the economy and build market confidence. At the core of the government stabilization efforts is the 3 billion standby arrangement, which was approved in July 2023. This led to initially disbursement of 1.2 billion by IMF. It also gave confidence to the friendly countries to disburse about 3 billion in bilateral assistance at the same time or a little after that. The State Bank reserves, which had dropped down to almost 4.4 billion, equivalent to 1.1 months of import, have now increased to almost 7.5 billion, 1.8 months of import cover as of 13th November 2023. I am hoping that with the news that I'm going to give you, we will have more increments in our foreign exchange reserves, because we have just finished the review of the IMF second tranche, and this has been agreed mutually. And after the IMF management and board have approved the package, we should be able to get another 700 billion. And with that, we are hoping there will be unlocking of the multilateral quick dispersing assistance, which we have already negotiated, and they hopefully will go to the board soon. So I think the first comfort that I want to provide to our colleagues in Karachi as well as our international participants, that Pakistan is well on the move to strengthen its reserves. As you know, this will restore more business and investor confidence. Just a little word about this agreement, staff level agreement, which we have managed to conclude just yesterday evening. We are hoping that this will take us forward with the efforts that we will be launching, further deepening of our commitment to advance the planned fiscal consolidation, which is very critical for Pakistan. We are hoping to accelerate cost-reducing reforms in the energy sector, whose viability has been threatened by the unfortunately reckless policies that we had. We also hope to turn the energy sector viable over the period, and we are launching a range of governance reforms to attract investment, support job creation, while of course strengthening the social assistance program to support the vulnerable parts of our society. There's a lot in this stabilization package. If you are interested, I would refer you to the IMF website, which has further details of the major components of this agreement that we have completed. This is not a signed agreement. This is a disclosure of the IMF to the public about the discussions we have had and the major pillar of the reforms. It's essentially a continuity of the overall SPA framework that we had embarked on, but also it talks about few other areas in order to ensure broadening and deepening of the reforms. So I'm not going to take all the time to discuss the IMF. Let me move towards the other part of the good news, that if we were to complete the IMF standby agreement effectively, we would be getting our economy back on track in the years where we have made remarkable progress. And I want in today's session to share with you what Asfar had asked me, is to talk about the big picture. which can only emerge if we implement the SPA effectively. And this big picture has to be on pathways for sustainable development and shared prosperity. For those who are Pakistani colleagues there, you all know that Pakistan has all the requisites of being a major economic player in the region and Asia. According to a World Bank report, our economy could reach almost 2 trillion by 2047 from $350 billion today. However, this requires the formulation and implementation of sound economic and sectoral policies and our determination to actually pursue difficult, challenging structural reforms to achieve the potential of this economy. Unfortunately, looking back at the last 3 decades, the failure to initiate meaningful reforms has meant that Pakistan has fallen behind regional economies in terms of, if nothing else, of the human and social indicators. So, to me, what is the big picture? As you know, once again, after some steady and sustainable growth periods that we have had, we stand today at a crossroads. The decision over the next decade will determine Pakistan's future and its 240 million people's fate. The big question is, will Pakistan rise to the challenges ahead and transform its economy? Of course, I'd like to think we will be able to rise up to the challenges. But what does Pakistan need? Pakistan needs more innovation and diversity in the structure of the economy for sustainable growth. The manufacturing base or the export base or the agriculture basket are all focused on a very narrow range of products and have failed to penetrate new markets because they haven't been diversified. Neither our agriculture, nor our exports, nor our industry, nor our workforce. So effective implementation of ambitious reforms has to touch upon not only these 4 critical sectors, but more than that, introduce a technological revolution in Pakistan. As I said, effective implementation of ambitious reforms will depend exclusively on our ability to be able to achieve political stability, institutional and governance strengthening. We need to build stronger institutions to deal with the momentous challenges facing Pakistan today. We not only were confronted with the domestic crisis, which were very specific, ranging from economic crisis to climate crisis, and the surge in the global commodities, which also hit our balance of payment. But let me first talk about, after the political stability and some of these other things, I'd like to mention that we should really overhaul the government's fiscal apparatus so as to lower the revenue expenditure gap. Our tax to GDP has remained low. It's around 10 to 11% in the last 3 decades, with the government forced to finance large fiscal deficit through borrowing from domestic and external creditors. We are crowding out our private sector through our domestic borrowings. What are we doing to address this? We are a caretaker government, so we have a limited life. We have developed an action plan for restructuring Pakistan's tax administration called the Federal Board of Revenue. To us, the most absolute element there is strengthening the internal governance of the FBR. Over and above we have a number of areas where we would be restructuring the FBR. And we would be moving towards innovative digital technologies that will help us broaden the tax base and minimize the tax policy and compliance gap. It will help us increase tax collection, and it will reduce the share of the shadow economy because we will be hunting all the non-filers more effectively, and also the taxpayers who have been underreporting their incomes or their businesses. So there is a lot of work underlying this, but we are counting on us to move faster, and hopefully at some point when we have made progress, I will be able to report back to you. In addition, in the tax area, we are working towards the separation of the tax policy and revenue division and moving it from administrative functions and to be an independent division which will be reporting directly to the Minister of Finance. This will remove the apparent conflict of interest in tax collection. Tax policy has to be designed to be fair, equitable, and productive. The revenue and fairness objectives need to be pursued by expanding the tax base, reducing tax exemptions, and through a more efficient digital administration. We will be working very closely with NADRA that will also upgrade its data systems, and we have established a technical committee to be chaired by the NADRA chair and the FBR chairperson, and I will be working with them inside or outside the technical committee, given that I have to look at other areas of the tax administrative reforms too. Simultaneously, for us, there is need to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of public expenditures. There is urgent need to improve coordination within the federal government and with provinces and reorient expenditure priorities towards social welfare. I have to share with you that we had established a National Finance Commission that looked at devolution. In 2018, in a hasty manner, we devolved a lot of subjects, but also gave away a lot of the share of revenue to the provinces. It's something everybody makes a mistake. All the other countries have also had issues with in terms of the devolution process. It's not an easy thing to do that in a political setup. So we, for right now, cannot introduce a new devolution mechanism. But what we have agreed with the provinces is that we will transfer the provincial components of expenditure back to the provinces, and the federal will take its responsibility and the provinces will. There will be some time lag in this process. As you know, provinces also run this very elaborate Benazir income support program, and they have their own public sector development program under which a lot of projects have been funded by the federation. So they will be transferred to the domain of the provinces over the period in a phased manner. We are open to looking at options with private sector to shift the large infrastructure projects under the PPP mode. Pakistan has some experience in this area, particularly in the Sindh province. We have a PPP center which has done wonders for the province in this area, and it has been ranked as the top 6 by the Euro magazine that I had read some time back. Of course, this will help raise sizable savings on the budgetary resources for both federal and provincial governments. We are looking at ways to enhance allocation of viability gap funding for undertaking infrastructure projects in PPP mode. We are also exploring avenues to seek credit guarantees from InfraZamin. That is an institution that was sponsored by Karan Das and the FCDO to enhance private sector investment in infrastructure. And I'm sure Mahin, who's also a speaker on your platform, will elaborate on that. A second major big picture item for you is really a determination to restructure loss-making state-owned enterprises. This also touches on our commitment with the IMF. In a short time, we have been able to not only, of course, the legislation was prepared before we stepped in, but we have developed an SOE policy framework, which has been discussed in 3 rounds at the Cabinet Committee on the State-Owned Enterprises. We are trying to improve the efficiency and functioning of the state-owned enterprises to reduce the drain on the fiscal module. And the government is operationalizing the centralized monitoring unit within Ministry of Finance, and it will monitor the state-owned enterprises, publish regular reports on financial performance and contingent liabilities. There is a lot in the state-owned enterprise policy which is available on our website, and we are of course fast-tracking the privatization of the state-owned companies. The focus, of course, of our policy is to improve the governance and financial efficiency of the top 10 loss-making state-owned enterprises. The privatization program is very ambitious for the period we are in the government. It has been fast-tracked. The financial advisor for PI have been appointed. We are working with the IFC team on concession and management contract for discos. We are also working on operationalization of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, whose legislation was passed by the Parliament before we came. This has already been launched. Its council is headed by the Prime Minister, and I am in the council to support the Prime Minister along with few other cabinet members. We hope to further strengthen this sovereign wealth fund. There are about 7 state-owned companies that have been transferred into the sovereign wealth fund legally, and we will be conducting audits of these companies, and there will be 7-member advisory council, which will be an independent, non-political set of international council members who will set up a non-political board of directors and appoint through competitive process the CEO for this sovereign wealth fund. We will be meeting other sovereign wealth funds and inviting them to discuss how to move forward with their support. Let me move to another important area, which is enhancing competitiveness. We have to really keep this in our big picture. It doesn't happen overnight, but we have to address to be self-sufficient. First, we have to mobilize our domestic resources. Then we have to move towards mobilizing foreign exchange revenue earnings that are purely ours, which means that the only sustainable way to address balance of payment crisis that we end up facing is to address the export-port gap. It has to be reduced exclusively through promotion of exports. We can't compress imports because imports are always an important element in our exports. We have to make sure we develop a tax neutrality regime for our exports, and that is why I have recommended to the management of Pakistan for a very high-powered tax policy and revenue independently. Competitiveness of Pakistani exports has to be improved. Our private sector has to play a phenomenal role in it. Any industry that is launching investment should really focus on export orientation. We, of course, have a big domestic market. We have to have import substitution, but I think countries that have progress in Asia Pacific, which has been my home and a ground where I have learned a lot, it's the export orientation that promotes sustainable economic growth. And we want to make sure we continue the path of market-based exchange rate regime that can avoid the overvaluation of local currency. The anti-export policies of the last 3 decades have led to loss of competitiveness of our manufacturing base. Exports have failed to make a transition from low technology to high technology products, as about 70% of the country's exports continue to be low technology products. In addition, the country has failed to diversify its export commodities and its export markets. Textile and clothing sector, which contributes almost about 5% of world trade, dominates the country's exports, which account for 58% of total exports. This I treat as a vulnerability. It's our strength, but it is our vulnerability too, because diversification reduces the vulnerability. Similarly, more than 50% of exports rely on only 4 markets: USA, EU, China, and Afghanistan. And you know the situation in Afghanistan. So the country has been losing competitiveness in international markets and finds it harder to sell even within its traditional markets. But we want to diversify our markets. Pakistan's loss of competitiveness is evident because our export of goods and services unfortunately declined to 10% of GDP relative to the regional average of about 15 to 19%. To facilitate exports to new markets and encourage the export of new products, we have already operationalized the Exim Bank, which had been lying dormant for almost 3 years in this country. This will bring credit guarantees and insurance products for our exporters in markets where we have not entered. It will encourage them to target new markets for exports. The Export-Import Bank is a part of the mandate of Ministry of Finance, and that is why we were able to fast track in the first month of my being in the office here. Another factor for us is the tariff structure that has a significant anti-export bias. Within the tariff policy space, a large number of our regulations distort the trade regime by modifying the notified import duties selectively without any economic justification. Now, during our IMF program, we cannot move into adjustments in the rates. We can remove exemptions, but we can't lower the tax rates or the tariffs at this point. But we plan to leave a plan which will guide the future team to be able to achieve this. Of course, we have to find mechanisms to lower the import content because of our balance of payment issues, but we don't want to cut out the imports because imports will lift the game of our exports, and we will be able to recoup the foreign exchange that we deploy for the imports. That's what rest of Asia has done, that has really moved towards 70% export orientation in its industry or in its export business. Pakistan has to move from its lowest integration in global value chains to being almost equivalent to our competitors here. Some progress has been achieved in streamlining customs rules and procedure to expedite the clearance of both exports and imports through the single window operations, but more work is needed to achieve international best practices. Today, I have a decision that I had placed before the leadership to separate the customs from the revenue collection mechanism. They will be tracking the smuggling and other elements, while the revenue collection will remain a mandate of FBR. This is a part of restructuring of the FBR, and there will be a notification to this effect sometime next week. There will be more notifications coming out on the restructuring of the FBR. How do we encourage new investment? Some of it I have already laid out, but I think we have to have persistent efforts to reduce the investment saving gap that has grown to be more acute in the last few decades. It has really limited the growth potential of the economy. We have to encourage savings and not encourage consumption. But we are a consumer-oriented society, and our economy thrives on consumer orientation, be it big cars or luxury items that we import recklessly without looking at our balance of payment difficulties. But of course, it's a very open, liberal society, so we can't hammer anything and we can't restrict things. So we have to change the incentive regime in order to have higher gains, to have gains of higher GDP growth. You may have heard, and is often a criticism of this special investment facilitation platform. It has been set up to materialize new investments in critical infrastructure and neglected productive sectors of the economy, including agriculture, minerals, IT services. It is promoting corporatization. It has brought the unutilized land, even of the deserts, into exploitation of the agriculture, and it is facilitating G2G arrangements and has successfully executed the first transaction between KPT and AD Ports of the UAE for the container terminal at Karachi. We are also looking at few other G2G arrangements. SIFC is also facilitating potential partnership of the Saudi Wealth Fund in the 7 billion Recordec transaction, which you may have heard about. Under the SIFC, a transaction pipeline expedite investment in critical infrastructure has been developed, and it includes about 10 billion of investments, particularly the Saudi Aramco refinery project and the agriculture corporate farm lease of 85,000 acres of land to potential foreign investors. Let me move to another area, which is the financial inclusion strategy. It is to focus on using digital platforms, non-banking channels to bring financial services to the masses, an area where Pakistan has really achieved some success. Pakistan authorities launched an ambitious national financial inclusion strategy in 2018. An elaborate digital infrastructure is being developed. It has already helped us launch what we call the RAS Payment Gateway in 2021. This is going to be breaking new frontiers because we are connecting RAS to Buna which will be, the project has already been launched in Dubai, and it will connect us with the GCC market, which is going to be a greater export focus, but also is a hub for the remittances that we have. But this RAST has enabled instant end-to-end digital payments between individuals, businesses, and government entities. So, my colleagues out there and our visitors from overseas, let me conclude by telling you that while we may have another 2 months or so, we have in the first quarter of our term, we have undertaken a lot of bold reforms. Which lay the foundation for a new era of development and prosperity in the country if our reforms are managed well with proper pace and sequence. We need to establish a fast-growing and efficient economy that is capable of creating more quality jobs to absorb its labor force, which is growing very fast, especially as you know, the youth of our country has ambitions and is our precious asset. We are an economy that has to be more self-reliant and yet economically better integrated with economies in the region and beyond. It has to be an economy which is forward and outward looking, willing and capable of attracting investments, dismantling all the barriers that the foreign investor faces, and making sure we are competing for our rightful place in the international trade and commerce business. So thank you, Asfar, for inviting me, and thank you to your delightful audience. I have seen the list. It's an impressive group. I hope I have added some value in terms of bringing what we have been doing in the last 2-3 months here in Islamabad. Over to you.
Thank you so much. We know how busy you are. Thank you so much. We are ever so grateful.
Thank you.
We were talking about the potential, and I think Dr. Shamshad outlined it so beautifully well, that though we may have exports, we may have agri, we may have manufacturing, but all needs to become innovative, more diverse, and more suave when it comes to technology, and that's the only way forward. In the contemporary era, the big picture takes on new dimensions with the advent of globalization. Our world is more interconnected than ever before, with technology, trade, and communication breaking down geographical barriers. Recognizing our shared destiny on a global scale prompts us to address pressing issues such as climate change, social justice, and economic inequality collaboratively. The big picture in this context calls for collective action and a shared vision for a sustainable and equitable future. And for this conversation to move forward, we have a wonderful panel joining us. I'll request Arif Habib, Chairman, Arif Habib Corporation, to please join us on stage. Yes, nice claps, please. Dr. Zilaf Munir, Managing Director and CEO, English Biscuit Manufacturers Limited. Dr. Zilaf, wonderful. Maheen Rahman, Chief Executive Officer, Infrazamin, Pakistan. The session will be moderated by Ehsan Malik, Chief Executive Officer, Pakistan Business Council. Over to you, Sir Ehsan.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I have the privilege of heading the Pakistan Business Council, which is a business advocacy body. A hallmark of success of advocacy is when the finance minister repeats virtually everything that you've been talking about for the last year or whatever period of time that you've been talking about these things. We've also been very fortunate in engaging with the finance minister. I think I'm trying to remember, were there 4 weekends or 5 weekends that we've spent with her, trying to bring her up to date with the current challenges as well as some of the opportunities. And the mere fact that she's repeated a lot of it and implemented a few of those, given the limited time that she's been there, I think is credit to her. She's a brave person. This is the second time that she's taken on a great responsibility at a very tough time, and I think we need to applaud her for her strength, courage, and abilities. Now that said, a lot of things that she's mentioned are defects or flaws that exist within our economies. And these have existed for many years, for many decades, as she rightly pointed out. I think she mentioned 3 decades, it's probably longer. Successive governments have failed to effect fundamental reforms. These are flaws that have been there for many years. They have not been corrected. 23 IMF programs later, some of the solutions that IMF has tried to impose have also not succeeded. But I don't blame the IMF. It is primarily our own fault and our own weak political will and our inability to implement things that we know need to be done, but they are not done. But we are not going to spend a significant amount of time today talking about what is wrong in the policy framework, although I have to admit that much as I would try and much as the titans that I have with me would try, it is very difficult to miss those. We are actually going to focus on something that may, I hope, come across to you as a constructive criticism, and mostly it is about us, about what role the business has to play in trying to get a sense of responsibility and contribute positively to the economy. So what I'm trying to say here is this is time for business to hold a mirror to itself and to see, are we as a business community doing what is required by the country, by the planet, and of course by the people of this country. The fact is, there is a perverse consensus within the political leaderships in this country and the major stakeholders, and the perverse consensus is to maintain the status quo. We in business need to make up our mind, do we want to be part of the status quo and let the economy sink as it has been doing, or do we want to make a change? This is all about the Future Summit. Yeah? So shall we today try and identify what are the basic things that we need to do differently? Okay, when the economists look at performance of a country, they talk about the twin deficits. They talk about the external account deficit and they talk about the fiscal account deficit. But in my opinion, there is a third, more alarming and a rapidly growing deficit, which is actually responsible for the other 2 deficits. And this is the trust deficit. This is a deficit between the key institutions of this country, between the political parties, with the judiciary, within the judiciary, within the establishment, and of course, what is loosely referred to as elite or elite capture. Now, if we in business think that we are not part of the elite capture, we are fooling ourselves. If you look at the PSX 25, top 25 companies this year, 60% of those are living off the state in one way or the other. They are enjoying subsidies, they are enjoying guaranteed returns, they are enjoying import tariff protection. There are banks amongst us which find it very comfortable to lend to the government and shy of lending to the key sectors like agriculture and SMEs. Of course, the big boys are able to borrow from the banks. Now, can a failing economy, and I call it a failing economy because we are not out of the woods, whatever the SBA has achieved, standby arrangement is a bridging loan. It is a temporary relief. We have to contend with fundamental reform still. Do we as business want to put burden on a government which is getting weaker by the day and which is not able to find enough to invest in socio-economic development? Pakistan stands at number 4 amongst the South Asian countries when you compare it with India, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. The biggest challenge that we have is to find the resources to invest in the socio-economic development of the country. So what does the country need? As the finance minister just pointed out, we need exports very badly, significantly more exports than we do. We also want to create an import substitution, but primarily in our food items, because it just does not make sense for an agrarian society to import as much as we do of food. But unfortunately, aside from textiles, which have some external orientation, most of our businesses are very inward looking, and we do not have that export competitiveness. Is that a task that the government alone has to do? Clearly not. It is the business that has to deliver on that. The other key issue is that there are 240 million people in the country. It's a large population. And so it is very attractive for our businesses to focus on domestic market. Our FDI is virtually 99.99% focused on benefiting from the demographic dividend of a large population, rapidly urbanizing, young people, very adaptable to move from open goods into branded products. I work for one of those companies, so I can speak with some experience. And so is our domestic players. Our utility rates are significantly higher than the regional players or the regional competitors. So we have to contend with that. Our trade agreements do not open us up in a suitable manner relative to countries like Vietnam in particular in terms of market access. The trade agreement with China has not worked to Pakistan's advantage. As a result of some renegotiation by Yunus Daga, who was going to be here in the panel but unfortunately is unwell, is not able to join us, it improved our standing to the degree that by 2030, 75% of the goods that we produce will be able to sell duty-free into China. But I can tell you, Bangladesh, without any free trade agreement, today can sell 98% of its goods to China. So this is the state of a failure of a trade diplomacy. Our fiscal policies obviously goes without saying, everybody knows, burden the few and keep on putting additional burden as we speak. There were changes even yesterday, additional taxes on banks, for example. Our import tariffs are high, as the finance minister mentioned. This is all alarmingly leading to further informalization of the economy. Smuggling has grown, counterfeiting is growing, under-invoicing is growing. PBC has identified a significant value of under-invoicing and therefore loss of revenue. So all these are issues that are confronting. But moving aside from the pure economics, but looking at the social part of how our business is run, gender inclusion is significantly lower in Pakistan than it is in Bangladesh. A lot of businesses still regard having one solitary woman on the board as their contribution to gender inclusivity. That clearly is not enough. We need to develop talent pipelines. Environmental responsibility for many of the businesses starts from sourcing to the end point of consumption as our responsibility, as business responsibility. And of course, labor compliance is also something that we regard as our responsibility for our own employees, but we don't care much about what happens to the indirect employees. So these are some of the factors that I would like to take up with our very able titans who are sitting here. I'm excluding myself from the definition of titans. Titans are people who have a lot of power, influence, and intellect, and I lack all of those abilities. But I turn to you, Arif Habib Saab. Is rent seeking an issue that is facing Pakistan and businesses, and is there a justification for this? I know in the past there may have been some justification, but is there an ongoing justification? How would we defend that as being the leaders of business?
First of all, thank you, Nutshell and Asfar Ahsan for providing this opportunity of interacting with such a important audience here. And you, in fact, referred, sorry. Yeah. So, first of all, thank you, Nutshell and Asfar Ahsan for providing this opportunity of interacting with such a important audience here. You referred in your introduction about the top companies, top 25 companies, and your question about the rent seeking. I believe those companies which have qualified there are 4 sectors which in fact are dominating in top 25 companies list. One is E&P, number 2 is power sector, and number 3 is fertilizer, and number 4 is banking sector. So you see the first 3 mainly are having a dollar-based revenues and returns. And because of the recent devaluation of Pakistani rupee, they have been the beneficiary of that, and in terms of rupee, their revenues have substantially improved. And I think if we take E&P, E&P has the pricing mechanism with international market, you see. So when the international market moves in that direction, their products are in fact priced in. And in few instances, when the energy prices goes very high, then their correlation is not that high. As far as the energy sector is concerned, again, they have the dollar-based guaranteed return, and on that basis, but still, a lot of investors see the risk in that, and they have the problems of getting their payments on the time. The fertilizer sector, in fact, there is a misperception that there is a subsidy on it. There is no subsidy on it. You see that they are being provided a lower price gas, but their local pricing is much lower than the international market. So generally, we when calculate the farmers, in fact, are getting the fertilizer at a lower price in comparison to international market. For example, presently the urea bag price internationally is about 7,000 rupees per bag, whereas now the price, in fact, has increased to 3,700, 3,600. It used to be 2,500. So 1/3 of the international price, the urea was being sold in Pakistan. So out of that 2/3 price differential, the gas price impact was only 1/3 of that. 2/3 was being borne by the fertilizer companies. So again, there was no subsidy to the fertilizer companies. Yes, the farmers are being provided urea at a lower price, mainly because of the food security consideration. The banks, in fact, have the beneficiary because of the high inflation in Pakistan and high interest rate, and because of that, their margins, in fact, have increased, and they are making good money out of it. And mainly because of the weak economic conditions of the country, in fact, the government has been the biggest borrower, and that biggest borrower is the main reason that they put most of their money into that. As far as the availability of funds for the private sector is concerned, I don't see any issue in that. There are not sufficient takers of the loan in Pakistan, mainly because of the high cost of energy here, high interest rate, and high in fact, taxation rate. So there are 3 major big problem in Pakistan economy, and because of that, I think there is very, very slim chances of, in fact, attracting investment from outside Pakistan, mainly because of these 3 negative factors. Unless we, in fact, address these factors, and to me, I believe that this will be possible if the interest rates go down. They go down because presently the 22% policy rate, I think, is not, in fact, affordable. Is not affordable, and it's killing for government financing itself. And I believe that in a period of about 1 to 1.5 years, I think that this policy rate would come down to 12%. And if the 10% reduction in the policy rate would save Pakistan about 3 trillion rupees. And that 3 trillion, I believe, I would suggest, would be spent in fact, reducing the tax rate here. That will definitely be contributing to the lower interest rate, would help the businesses. But The energy also being in fact priced in such a way that our exports become competitive regionally. So with these three negatives, it would be very, very difficult to improve in the industrial exports. As far as the IT is concerned, yes, there is a lot of scope there, and we have the raw material, we have the human resource there, and we can then galvanize them and in fact train them and use them for improving our exports in IT. Agriculture, yes, I think agriculture is the area which can in fact has a short time of turnaround time, and there I think Pakistan has a lot of scope. The import substitution would also be, and then we can also produce surplus for export.
Thank you, Arbai. Okay, so remaining on agriculture, I want to move to Zilaf. Zilaf happens to be, heading English Biscuits, which is obviously, using agricultural produce to make its products. So turning to you, two questions actually. The first question is, the SIFC is trying to bring investment into the agriculture sector through corporate farming and so on. How will that affect Pakistan's food security? I know it would assure the food security of the investor countries. How would that protect Pakistan's food security? And why can't Pakistan, manage to cultivate that land itself? I mean, Pakistanis manage to cultivate that land itself. So that's my first question to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ehsan. It's first and foremost a pleasure being here, and I've always enjoyed my conversations with you as a moderator. It's been a positive experience, so look forward to the same. Thank you, Nutshell and Ehsan and all the participants for being here. So if you could allow me the indulgence of just taking a lead from your opening remarks, and then I will get to your question, because I felt we are here in the Future Summit, the big picture, investment business. So, and I speak not just as the CEO of EBM, but also as a concerned citizen, who actually, it drives from the vision of an accountable, transparent, and prosperous Pakistan. So the point that I want to first talk about is the trust deficit that you spoke about. And I think I would like to just quickly make 3 points related to that, because we are here representing the private sector. Yes, the trust deficit is for real. The World Economic Forum survey in 2022 stated that 22% of the Pakistanis have trust and faith in their institutions. And yes, we talk about the economic, fiscal and current account deficits, but this is a very significant deficit for any kind of economic growth. So what do we the 3 points that I was going to make was, number one, the trust deficit, number two, the heterogeneity of the private sector, and number three, the positive impact that the private sector has. So yes, I think as a private sector, we first need to acknowledge and recognize that this exists, and that we need to be bridging this gap. And to do that, I think we speak from, if I look at it, I come from a brand perspective, if you look at it from not just Pakistan, but global numbers, consumers around the world trust brands more than their governments or media. So yes, there is a role that we have to play, but we have to first reflect on what is it that's leading to this trust deficit or this gap. And you mentioned one, which is, so we have to be eschewing rent seeking. We have to be looking at ethical business practices. We have to be looking at competitiveness, and we have to be looking at innovation. And that is what we can do. And I take that as
bringing in the point of heterogeneity of the private sector. And it's not a monolith. It is a diverse group, and it encompasses a lot. So let's also look at the policies and legislation and frameworks to be doing justice and recognizing that, and also be providing level playing fields. But they are doing they're doing a great job. And the positive aspect, I again can just give you example of the FMCG sector, which I'm sure now, and we've heard from, we are hearing from other sectors as well. It is, if we look at whether it is alignment with the sustainability goals, whether it is competitiveness, whether it is innovation, whether it is good business practices, we have examples that we can be looking up to, and we can be leveraging that. So, it's about looking forward. It's about, perception is reality. So perception is what we have to be addressing, which is with the image, with the values, with our practices, and that should lead to the private sector being able to play the role that it needs to be playing. Now coming to your question of, if I remember correctly, of agriculture and corporate farming. Complex, very complex, but I would say I am cautiously optimistic. So yes, the agriculture sector, it is underperforming. We are an agrarian economy, and the very existence of Pakistan and prosperity depends on it. So there's no denying that. Yes, we have a food security issue. We are number 122 out of 126 in the global food health index, hunger index, which comes in the serious range. So of course there is an issue. Is investment in corporate farming, agriculture, by private sector, is that the answer? It depends on the intent, number one. Number two, yes, with the right kind of legislation, with the right kind of policies, to ensure that it addresses what we are setting out to address. And the last thing that you spoke about was about, the private businesses like ours getting into corporate farming and agriculture. Yes, from the lens of the future, one can be looking at these things. But we also have to deal with the reality of what is the current agriculture sector and what are the on-ground realities. So when we look at big businesses and crops which actually have support prices and which actually have intermediaries and which actually have, so yes, there are complexities, but you can look at them. And you should be looking at them because you bring in the entrepreneurial spirit and the expertise.
Thank you, Zilaf. I think,
yes.
Yeah. So just because we have limited time, I want to move to Maheen. Maheen, of course, heads Infazamin. And Maheen, could you please share with us the role that Infazamin is playing and can potentially play, particularly to promote export-oriented and agricultural sectors? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is not working.
Put it on.
It's on? Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and always a pleasure to be here, Asfar. Thank you for having me here again, and great to be speaking to all the wonderful people on the panel today. We've been talking about a lot about the private sector, and I think one of the key things that we have to understand is the private sector needs one basic ingredient to grow, and that's capital. It's funding, it's money. Because without that, how do you scale up? And I think let's talk a bit about what the problem actually has been in Pakistan. If we go back to the 1960s, and I do not want to make this a history lesson, but I think this is important. the total private sector lending as a percentage of GDP was approximately 25%. And back in the 60s, we were on par with a lot of emerging economies. India was about 24, Bangladesh was close to 14. You had the big giants, you had China, Malaysia sitting at 70, 80%. But fast forward 30 years or 40 years, and anyone want to venture a guess as to where we stand today in terms of private sector lending from the banking system? I'll give you some points. Bangladesh is at 45. India is at about 55. This is just lending as a percent of GDP. China is close to over 100%. Malaysia is crossed 100%. And we know how those economies have done. Any idea where we stand as of last year's numbers on just that metric? We were 25 for about 20, 30 years. We were averaging that. Guess where we're at today? 10? So we've actually dropped down to the bottom 4 of emerging markets, which is at just a bare 17%. And this is last year. If you look at 23, we're probably even lower. So if we're not giving our businesses, our private sector, the money to grow, what do we expect is going to happen to that private sector? It's going to keep rolling over whatever it has and trying to grow within that ambit, right? And this comes back to what our panelists have been discussing, which is a trust deficit. Why aren't the banks lending? The banks are not lending because there is an inherent risk in lending. And in order to overcome that risk, that private sector also has to step up and mitigate some of that risk. It has to be both of them coming together. But instead, what we've seen is the government has crowded out a lot of that private sector investor, because obviously it's easier to lend to government. And this is at a time, we've come down from 25 to 17, at a time when the banking sector assets have gone up in the last 5 years from 18 trillion rupees to 34 trillion rupees today. But only about 11 trillion actually goes to the private sector in terms of lending. So why am I giving you this story? Because we have a market failure in place. And it's institutions such as Infrazam, and we're not the only ones. We have others such as the IFC, you have FMO, you have BII, who all try and address these market failures. But what have we done in the last 2 years? So we're an institution that's just barely 2.5 years old in Pakistan, but we've already managed to mobilize almost 4 billion rupees just in the last couple of years towards private sector lending. We've done a local bond issue, we've done a banking sector transaction, and both of these borrowers were those that were looking for some innovation, looking for something different, and looking to raise capital. And if I talk about the bond transaction that we recently did, forget that it was a gender bond. Let's talk about the transaction in itself. What was the problem statement? We had a microfinance institution, and we know how much risk microfinance carries. And what we did is we de-risked it. So we took that risk away from the microfinance, and we said Infrazamin will absorb that risk in case of any default. So we will stand behind your lending. And that's precisely what we did with Kash Foundation. And we launched a bond in the market of about 2 billion rupees, which was subscribed to fully by over 28 institutional capital market investors. And that was your mutual funds, it was your pension funds, it was your insurance companies. And that's the kind of crowding in that you need to see. Now, the scale may be small, but you can certainly translate it across multiple different industries. So what we're now trying to do, and this has always been our strategy, and we have a few broad themes that we look at. One is climate adaptation. We are way beyond the mitigation stage. We are going to suffer from climate change, so we have to adapt. The second is export orientation and import substitution. The third is energy resilience, and the fourth is food security. These are the 4 sort of components that we're looking at. And we've just recently closed one that covers the climate aspect as well as the gender aspect. But what we're seeing in front of us is actually a surging demand of private companies coming to us and saying, please, can you look at our project, can we guarantee it? So I think when we talk about demand, we were surprised to see so many corporates, and we're not talking about the big business groups or the elites here. We're talking about, and that's the most exciting part, because we're talking about the next layer of businesses that want to become the future big owners of the country. And there we are seeing great projects come through in agriculture. We're working with the private parties. We're working with the federal government on looking at corporate farming, on looking at storage facilities, on looking at research and training of farmers across, small farmers, across markets to see how can we help improve the yields of the crops that are grown here. We're also looking at renewable and recyclable businesses. So actually, we are huge consumers, or food consumers, of one particular item. Anyone want to guess what that item is? One thing we love to put in our food. We import it and we eat a lot of it. Any guesses? Oil. So we're one of the largest edible oil consumers in most emerging markets, and that's a population metric. But the recycling of that oil is not often done, except now, where we are actually seeing industries setting up collection points for used oil from all the restaurants, from all the businesses, and recycling it into fuel that can be used in cars, into biodiesel. And this is a pure export-led kind of industry. We are seeing a similar trend towards plastics as well. So, you know, I think there is so much innovation already happening in Pakistan's corporate sector. And you know, we are seeing, I think, a demand of almost 50 billion rupees of borrowing requirement that is coming from the private sector and needs to be funded by the capital markets and the banking sector of this country. So while we are a solution to a segment of that, we can't guarantee everyone, and not everyone really needs a guarantee, but we try and fit in as many pieces of the puzzle as we can. And even if we do one project, that one project then demonstrates to the market how to assess risk, price that risk, and do the next project without a guarantee. Because really that's how we're going to be able to push this entire sort of juggernaut forward, which is where we have to take the Pak economy to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that's really very inspiring. It is actually guaranteeing the future. One last question, Arabai Aapse. When will there be a Pakistani multinational abroad?
The Pakistanis don't have money. And whoever has money, they are blamed to be rent seeker. So number one. Number two, you see that Pakistan is, according to the international standards, are not so big. And in order to invest outside Pakistan, first of all, you are allowed to invest up to $500,000, I believe, with the approval of State Bank. And over and above $500,000, you have to apply to the ECC.
5 million, but still quite low.
It's quite, and they, you have to go there, and when you apply to them, they say, why are you going to outside Pakistan? We want investment into Pakistan, so make investment here. We had tried to put a fertilizer unit in USA, and in that we were able to structure do a financial structuring in which the foreign banks were in fact indicating to finance us in foreign currency on the basis of our local assets here. So, but in that again, we in fact couldn't get the permission from the ECC, right? So but I believe that the main reason is that our entrepreneurs and our industrialists know that big that they can go outside Pakistan and put industries. Yes, the retail investors, they go to Dubai and Malaysia and other areas, but not in a big and not in a formal way, so informal way. So I think once, and because of the continuous devaluation, you see, I when calculate in whatever in fact wealth we had in 2007 and 8 in dollar terms, Today, though we have quadrupled in rupees term, but in dollar terms we are there, still there at 2007 level. So this is the main, I think, issue. And as far as I was last week in Silicon Valley, there many Pakistanis have done well. In fact, there are Pakistanis who, in fact, had started there, and their company's valuation has now become, valuation is about $7 billion. The others, in fact, has the valuation of $43 billion. So they are doing well there, and I think they need to be facilitated more in order them to grow, and in fact, they transfer their business, or they, in fact, the Pakistanis are benefited with their roots there in Silicon Valley. So I think in that, I believe I see an opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that is probably all the time that we have. Do we have some more time? Okay, so I just wanted to sum it all up. I think one of the reasons why Pakistani businesses have not been able to build scale is not because we don't have a large population. It's because our fiscal authorities or our fiscal regulations do not encourage wealth creation or aggregation or consolidation or scale. There is, for example, if a large successful company wants to diversify and wants to list a subsidiary and invite capital, widen the shareholding, they are subjected to multiple levels of taxation on the intercorporate dividends. That's something that we've been taking up with multiple governments, but that there appears to be no solution. If you become successful, you become large, they put super tax on you. So instead of 29%, your tax rate goes up to 39%. So I know, I mean, if there are some, tax advisors
in
here.
In fact, it goes up to 65%.
Yeah, but I'm saying for a normal company. Yeah? So the point I'm trying to make is that what happens is that currently there are a number of large organizations that are taking advice on fragmenting their operations, splitting them up, so that they don't have to end up paying super tax in one if they remain as a single entity. This is totally doesn't make any sense at all. We should really be encouraging scale. We should be rewarding profit, and of course we should be taxing profit, but not by putting an additional tax. But forgetting even the tax rate, it is the sheer harassment. If the harassment remains at the current level, why should anybody want to come in and become a taxpayer? Wouldn't you rather than remain under the radar as a small or a medium-sized company? And the last but not the least, there is actually no incentive to corporatize. The tax rates on an individual businessman or association of persons or partnerships, as they're otherwise called, is significantly lower. When they withdraw money from their business, there's no tax. But a corporate, when it withdraws, pays a dividend, there's a 15% tax, in addition to whatever taxes they've been paid. So actually, our entire corporate sector, our company law, our fiscal laws, they all need to be looked at. So with that point, I mean, given that there is so much to do, there's always hope. So I want to end up on that note. So thank you very much to my titans. You've done a great job.
Thank you so much. I will just request all our eminent panelists to stay seated on the stage. This is the last session going on. I would like to announce that we are still trending on Twitter. Unity Foods Limited, sir, is on #1 right now. Amongst the trends, Big Picture is on #6. Lasha Tabdize is on #7, and the Future Summit 7th edition is on #9. So thank you to all those who've been contributing towards this trend. I would now like to request, this is the last session going on. We have eminent speakers coming up on stage now, and for that I would be requesting General Zubair Mahmood Hayat, Chairman, Joint Chief of Staff Committee 2016 to 19, to please join us on stage. I would also request Mohammad Aurangzeb, President and CEO, HBL, our co-host for the Future Summit 7th edition, for us to please join on stage. Yes, please, sir. Stay seated. Thank you, Aurangzeb. I would also request Dr. Moeed Yusuf, Vice Chancellor, Beacon House National University, to please join us on stage. I will also be requesting our CEO, founder, Nutshell Group, Mohammad Asfar Ehsan, to please come and join us on stage, and our CEO, Unity Foods Limited, Farooq Saab, to please come and join us on stage. We have very interesting addresses coming up, and for that, I would like to request Dr. Moeed Yusuf, Vice Chancellor, Beacon House National University, recognized as one of the leading scholars of his generation. Dr. Yusuf has taught political science and international relations at Boston University, George Washington University, Lahore University of Management Sciences, and Quaid-e-Azam University, a research fellow at Boston University's Pardee School and Harvard University's Kennedy School, and an associate vice president at the U.S. Institute of Peace. An accomplished writer, Dr. Yusuf has published extensively. His last book, Brokered Bargaining, was published by Stanford University Press in 2018. The mic is yours, Dr. Yusuf. Yes, yes.
My dear friends, I worked with Dr. Moeed Yusuf. We were a part of the same cabinet. I know him since last many years, but we were together for 6 months in the government, and he was simply brilliant and a real person Pakistan needs, actually. And now he's in the right position of Vice Chancellor, Beacon House National University, serving with the education sector of Pakistan. Thank you, Moeed.
Assalamu alaikum ji. So, Asfar, you've said two things. One, I'm in the right job now, so I was in the wrong job then. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And second, all of you know that Asfar lies now. So let me thank my very good friend Asfar, and somebody I thoroughly enjoyed working with in government. Also to Nutshell, to Habib Bank, Aurangzeb Saab, and everybody else who's put yet another fantastic event together. So congratulations to all of you. Big picture, true to form, allow me to be provocative. It's late in the day, so I need to keep everybody awake, including myself. Let me give you 3 or 4 bullet points on the big picture, and then I'll come to talking about where we are. First big picture bullet is that the world has moved on from the unipolar moment. That's the biggest picture. The US hegemony, as we knew it, is now moving towards something else. We don't know whether it's bipolar, we don't know whether it's multipolar. What we know is that great power contestation is back, and back with a vengeance. This is not surprising. If you look at international relations literature, you'll find that unipolar moments are usually very, very unstable and very short. So we are in the next phase, and none of us, no country in the world is going to escape some consequence of this. Whenever you have this kind of shift, you're going to have fluidity, and fluidity will bring opportunities and challenges. So the second big picture aspect that countries like Pakistan need to look at is whether we are going to be on the side of opportunity, or are we going to confront more challenges because of what's going to come our way. And let me just say that in the next phase of great power competition and geopolitics, unlike the Cold War, countries that are going to be more successful are those who are able to keep a multi-aligned posture for their foreign international relations. Countries that are forced to or choose to go in one camp versus another camp are far less likely to succeed. And the reason for that is very simple. There is one fundamental difference between the Cold War era and today, and that is the global economic integration across the world. You have COVID start in one country, and there is not a single human being who survived without being affected. Supply chains disrupted in China, prices rising as far as Brazil. A war in Ukraine, and Pakistan pays for oil and all sorts of other commodities way more than it did. This is here to stay. So, as I've always said, or recently at least, Pakistan's biggest challenge, foreign policy challenge, is going to be to avoid becoming a camp player. That's the second big picture. Third, Pakistan is in an especially odd, awkward, precarious, and yet potentially very opportunistic moment or situation. And that's because of our geography. If you look at the fluidity in the international world today, and if you look at the theaters of global conflict, you will find four. The first one, where there's, I think, the mainstay of the contestation between US and China, is the Asia Pacific, what the US calls Indo-Pacific now. It goes from Japan all the way in the west to India, and then other countries, of course. The second one is what I call the fires of the Middle East. In the last 20 years, there's been no major power that hasn't played a role in the Middle East in one conflict or another. And we've seen country after country disappear or almost disappear. That contestation starts from the Maghreb, goes all the way to Iran, that theater. The third one is less talked about, but Russia's backyard in Central Asia is intensely contested right now. And the southern tip of that, we saw the great game of the 21st century play out, was Afghanistan. Again, every single major power involved one way or another. The fourth theater is Ukraine and Eastern Europe. I won't talk about that. But the first three theaters, there is only one country in the world that is situated right in the middle of those three. So Iran is one border, India the other one, and Afghanistan and Russia's Central Asia backyard, the third one. And that's Pakistan. So if anybody in Pakistan thinks that we can escape the next round of great power competition and somehow hide as those headwinds come, it's impossible. We only have two choices. Either we become the proxy of one of the two or three great powers and live exactly like we did in the past 70 years, getting the quote-unquote resource inflow from conflict and all the consequences that come with it that we know of, or be proactively prepared to create positive interdependence with key global economies. So have enough to offer to both camps or three camps or whatever it will be, such that the cost of an unstable Pakistan is greater than the cost of a stable Pakistan for the rest of the world. That's essentially the challenge. That's essentially the challenge that every Pakistani policymaker should be grappling with day in, day out. Fourth big picture bullet. Pakistan did recognize this, does recognize this, and has been working on this. And a very clear, bold statement was made by the state of Pakistan last year in its first national security policy document, in which the country Pakistan, not an individual or a government or anybody, said that if we have to deal with what is coming our way, given what I've just explained, the only way to make that happen is through the economic security lens. Unless we can have economic security, we will be forced to become a proxy battleground for great powers. And to get to economic security, there were two things that it identified. One, Pakistan acting as the connectivity hub for the broader region, which will not only bring revenue, but it will create the kind of dependence of other countries in the region on Pakistan, such that creating instability in Pakistan would be very costly for them. And second, it talked about 3 avenues of raising non-debt foreign exchange. Export, FDI for re-export, and remittance through manpower export. Everything else that we've heard today, I wasn't here yesterday unfortunately, falls under these 3. Because you can't have export competitiveness unless you fix everything downstream. You are not going to be able to develop the private sector unless you have capital. And all of that fits under these 3, because at the end of the day, Pakistan's recurring economic crisis is about balance of payments. We keep running out of dollars again and again and again. So the framework is there, the consensus is there, the question is, are we going to implement it or not? But let me just say this. Anybody who tries to present a proposition which says that more of the same is a survival strategy is living in fool's paradise. It just can't happen, and we are running out of time. Fifth big picture element. Unfortunately, we are not prepared for what's coming. I think there's a very enlightening talk by the caretaker finance minister, and one can't disagree with everything said. And I think Ahsan Saab is absolutely right. It's a very brave decision to be in that situation right now, because the fiscal space is 0, essentially. But let me say why I think we are not prepared. I'm not talking of the technical side of this. This is a very provocative statement, but allow me. Number one, we are not prepared because the entity called the state, it's not one government, other government, one party or anybody. The entity called the state in its entirety has lived by one principle for 75 years. And it remains obsessed with somehow continuing to live with that principle. Which is that from wherever I can find resources, whether it's external partners, whether it's donors, whether it's the private sector here, I will find those resources so that I do not have to change my habits. I will do everything it takes to maintain the status quo and the elite privileges, but I will not let that be undermined. If that remains true, there is no possibility of a turnaround. Every single person sitting in this room, including me, is part of that problem, whether we like it or not. Second, why I think we're not prepared is, and that's been talked about, the private sector and the public sector interact with each other on 2 principles. Number one, a complete lack of trust. I sat in a position, and Asfar did too, and others, and Jan Zubair is sitting here. Every time there's a conversation between the public sector and the private sector, the public sector response was, sir, niche dekhe, land cruiser mein aaye hai, tax break maang rahe. They're driving, millions of dollars worth of cars, and here they are asking for concessions. There would be pride in people coming to me and saying, sir, CEO of so-and-so company came, I made him sit outside for half an hour. And the private sector, with all due respect to everybody, I'm really sorry, Asfar, but I don't remember a single conversation where a private sector person came and said, help the private sector. Every conversation was about help me and my industry, and by the way, don't help my competitor, he's a thief. And you make it so easy for the public sector to play one of you against the other and maintain the status quo. So what I'm talking about is psychological more than practical. But unless we change this, I don't think we're moving ahead. And finally, and the reason I think we're not prepared is that all the change agents are not allowed to rise in our system. System prizes people the system prizes people who will ultimately sugarcoat to maintain the status quo. Just 2 more minutes. You said 2 minutes. Okay, thank you. I'm on time. So what to do? Again, I'm not going to talk about the technicalities. There are people much more experienced and qualified here. Number one, stop talking about what's right and publicly acknowledge that there is something fundamentally wrong that all of us need to fix. Number two, answer a very simple question, as the government, as the private sector, as all of us. Why should the world not bypass Pakistan when it's looking for partners to give benefit to? What are things that we have not done, due to which we do get bypassed whenever there is any real conversation on global economics? Whether it's trading blocks, whether it's investment partnerships, whether it's regional blocks. Whatever those things are, take those are your national priorities, start fixing them one by one. Let me just put out 5 one-liners. Number one, unless the system, the political system is predictable, you can't make any long-term change. I'm not talking of stable, I'm not talking of this government, that government. Predictability of policy. Number two, public sector, private sector dialogue as partners rather than as opponents or adversaries. Third, public sector only seeing itself as a facilitator, not as the chief regulator in town, and the private sector seeking benefits for the private sector, not for an industry or an individual or a group. Fourth, accountability of redistribution of resources, which essentially can only come through one avenue, strong local governments. That's the only thing I care about in terms of the political resource distribution. And finally, not going to happen, but you will know we are on the right track when any government in Pakistan makes your education budget multiplied by 10. Last word to ensure that Asfar does not ask me to fly from Lahore in the morning and leave in the evening again. I've noticed one thing in my time of interaction with the private sector, from my perch. There's a lot of executive training, there's a lot of grooming. We heard somebody from Engro talk about mental well-being this morning. All of that is very, very important and great. But I find one thing completely missing, which is that the entire capacity building of the private sector, even the biggest of our actors, is about day-to-day management. How do you deal with leadership? How do you deal with management decisions, stress, etc.? The entire government is also day-to-day. Tomorrow morning, yesterday, that's about it. We cannot have good strategic decision-making in the private sector unless the leaders understand what's happening in the world, how is that going to affect Pakistan, and where is the economy going? I'm very surprised when I hear business leaders ask the exact same question of me as anybody on the street, which is, Dr. Sahab, kya ho raha hai? Kya banega? Ye Israel kidhar ja rahe hain? This should be something that is your starting point before you get to day-to-day management, leadership, stress, and everything else. So one of the things I'm actually now doing, and hopefully will bring to all of you, is that Dr. Hafiz Pasha, who I'm sure all of you know and needs no introduction, he's at BNU and a senior colleague of mine. We've designed a workshop kind of program, a day-long or 2-day-long program, where we are only going to focus on 2 things with business leaders. What's happening in the world? Where is it going? Where will it be in 5 years? And how does that affect Pakistan? What's happening to the economy? Where is it going? What will happen in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? And how does it affect Pakistan? And then we'll ask you, the business leaders, to figure out what that means for your business. Unless you do this, you will remain in the firefighting mode. So more on that later. Thank you very much.
As always, inspirational, inspirational. And I think I loved it when you stated that we have to decide to be proactively independent in such a way that the cost of unstable Pakistan becomes greater than that of maintaining a stable Pakistan. I think that kind of answers all the problems in a nutshell, if I could say that. So thank you so much. And as Mohit himself said, Dr. Mohit said that more on that later on. We now have Mohammad Aurangzeb, President and CEO, HBL, our co-host for this 7th edition of Future Summit, for his take on the theme of the summit, the big picture. Aurangzeb Saab, thank you.
First of all, thank you for the invitation, and aapko mubarak ho on a very successful summit. Unfortunately, I could not be here. As you know, I just arrived back from Beijing this morning, but it's great to be here. Dekhiye, I didn't compare notes with Dr. Mohit, but I would start with some of the macro points that he has raised, and then as a banker, I would be doing injustice to the industry if I don't make a few points, especially around some of the points that were made by the last panel. Dekhiye, ye Dr. Mohit ne bhi kaha, I'm sure all the thought leaders have already mentioned, there's no dearth of policy prescription in Pakistan. We know the what and the why part of it. Whether it was the World Bank study which was quoted, कि 2047 में वो बात ये नहीं कर रहे थे कि $300 billion से $2 trillion, they said 3 trillion हो सकती है, provided you do a few things. And then we've been signing various SLAs with the fund program over the last 3 years. We don't even have to go right into the yesteryears. So we know exactly what we are signing up for. Tax to GDP, exports, SOEs, the issue around the energy, जो सारी हम बात कर चुके हैं. हमारी प्रॉब्लम वहीं आती है आके जो ख़त्म होती है is the how and the implementation and the execution part of it. And that's where the how part which we need to figure out, and also the who part. ये प्रोफेसर किशोर महबूबानी हैं, उन्होंने सिंगापुर के बारे में ये बात कही कि how did Singapore became from a third world country to a first world country, and he said we followed MPH, meritocracy, pragmatism, honesty, and quite frankly that's governance 101, sheer competence or basic competence, right team at the right place, छोटी से छोटी कंपनी हो, बड़े से बड़ा मुल्क हो, timely decisions, timely execution. That's what is required to get the implementation going, and therefore leadership matters. So, अब अगर हम इसको जो अभी बात हो रही थी 9-month SBA की, quite frankly, this has been a watershed moment. I think we got some respite कि हमें ये 9 महीने का मौका मिला ताकि caretaker से we get and move on to an elected government. So that we don't have to get into a huge issue during this transition, and a lot of credit to the current caretaker setup that we have gone through the review in a good way with respect to the fund program and the next tranche. But the reality is that we will have to get into another program. I'm assuming other thought leaders and other leaders here have already talked about it. And जब मेरी पिछले हफ्ते बात हो रही थी with the fund mission, and they said we are in the 23rd program. Why do you think the 24th program is going to be a success? And I think it's a good question to be asked by the fund. And my response was, because our hand has been forced. The government's hand has been forced. If you first look at the external front, the dole-outs are gone. कि deposit दे दें, deposit को roll over कर दें. You know, it was a finance minister of a friendly country out of GCC who in Davos in January of this year, I'm not sure he was talking about Pakistan, but he was certainly talking about the countries that benefit out of those programs. They said, you help yourself and we'll help you. And therefore, all these friendly countries are now talking about equity investments and board seats. And that's where SIFC is a very pragmatic response to that investor interest as we go forward. The second thing is the domestic front. देखिए ये डॉक्टर शमशाद अभी बात कर रही थी, and I think she has pushed back, quite frankly, her cabinet colleagues in terms of saying there's nothing to give. There are no supplementary grants, right? Because that's where we are. And from that perspective, the fiscal space which is being created, uske do aspects hai. One is you can continue to tax, and that's what Dr. Mohid, I think, probably was referring to. You can continue to come back to the same for more. Salaried class, banks bhi hame usme, aaj, chunke main aaj I wapas arrive, I've just arrived back here in Karachi, another 40% tax, that's fine. But ye quarter to guzar jayega. And then what? What will you do in the next review? Unless you actually bring in the retail and the real estate and the agri sector. ये हमारी बातें हैं कि जी ये फेडरेशन पे क्या होगा, प्रोविंशियल क्या होगा, ये हमारा प्रॉब्लम है ना. So we have to look, and मैं इसमें डॉक्टर आतिम मियां का मैं बहुत मदाह हूँ, मेरी उनसे कभी मुलाकात नहीं हुई, लेकिन उन्होंने कहा कि हमें not only ecosystem, he said we have to look at the entire nervous system, because we hide behind these things. कि this is federation, this is this is provincial matter, etc. No, I mean you have to increase the tax net. इसी तरह जो expenditure side की बात है, the reality is this PSDP has to go away. Has to go away. जो अभी बात हो रही थी public private partnership, that's the way to go going forward. So इसमें अब जो कुछ और speakers ने ये बात की है कि जो charter of economy की बात है, and whether all the political parties can come together before the election, after the election, charter of economy हमें सिर्फ इसलिए चाहिए ताकि policy continuity रह सके. That's it. That's it. We don't need to get anything from the government or from Islamabad. That's it. Because Islamabad, quite frankly, has nothing to give. ये जो हम बात करते हैं कि जी ये हम इस्लामाबाद जाते हैं, और डॉक्टर मुईद ने भी उसका जिक्र किया कि कौन बाहर बैठा रहता है, कौन अंदर बैठा रहता है. हम इंडिया की बात करते हैं, जब बजट का वक्त आता है, जब बजट का वक्त आता है इंडिया में, तो मुंबई दिल्ली नहीं जाता, दिल्ली मुंबई आता है. बिकॉज द प्राइवेट सेक्टर ने मांगना बंद किया, प्राइवेट सेक्टर ने मांगना बंद किया. दे created their respect, and therefore the federation comes to engage with the private sector. And that's what we need to create here. And I'm very, very sure it's the private sector which has to lead Pakistan out of the issues and the situation that we are now. लेकिन उसमें हमें private sector में जो पहले भी बात हो चुकी है, we have to talk about charter of business. And charter of business is that we have to fundamentally look at our business models. और मैं अभी 1 मिनट में बैंकों पे भी आऊँगा, क्योंकि ये बात सही नहीं है कि बाकी सेक्टर्स के बारे में आप बात कर लें और बैंकों के बारे में चूँकि अभी बात की भी जा चुकी है, तो मैं आना चाहता हूँ वापस बैंक से ऊपर. तो उसमें हमें फंडामेंटली अपने बिजनेस मॉडल्स को रिव्यू करना है. And these import-led, subsidy-supported businesses are not going to be sustainable in Pakistan as we go forward. It's as simple as that. देखिए we can put our heads under the sand and say कि नहीं कोई ऐसी बात नहीं है, अगला program आएगा, and then we will go through it. And then there are people who are actually doing what they need to do. we talked to one of our clients and they got a joint venture with a Chinese company in terms of manufacturing SUVs here in Pakistan. ये जनवरी में उनसे बात हुई कि भाई कितनी SUVs यहाँ लाएंगे, फिर CKDs का प्रॉब्लम है, इंपोर्ट का मामला है, तो why don't you consider, और ये right hand है, तो why don't you consider export markets? And the first set of SUVs from this company a month back have gone to Kenya because they actually looked at the African market and they have gone the export way. So I think this can be done. The private sector and the businesses, if they actually think about these business models rather than saying कि नहीं ये जो status quo की बात की गई है डॉक्टर मईद ने, ये status quo अब नहीं चल सकता. And therefore, some of this will have to change. देखिए, जहाँ तक बैंकों का ताल्लुक है, from our perspective and certainly from HBL's perspective, HBL के सिलसिले में तो हम ये कहते हैं कि we are more than a bank because we are looking at three things. 35 institutions हैं where you can get financing. अभी बात भी हुई कहीं कि कहाँ कैपिटल इन्हांसमेंट हो सकती है, कहाँ क्रेडिट इन्हांसमेंट हो सकती है. बट फाइनेंसिंग इज स्टिल अवेलेबल. जहाँ तक डिमांड का ताल्लुक है, भाई 24-25% पे डिमांड नहीं है. People are deleveraging. The private sector is deleveraging unless because at 20-25% this is equity. You might as well put your equity rather than getting especially in the corporate and commercial segment to get financing at that rate. तो जहाँ तक सप्लाई का ताल्लुक है, वहाँ डिमांड का ताल्लुक है, जहाँ गवर्नमेंट बोरिंग का ताल्लुक है. और ये मुझे अभी तक याद है, मेरी इसाक डार साहब से इस साल के शुरू में बात हुई. उन्होंने कहा कि आपके रेट्स इतने चले गए हैं. मैंने कहा जी प्लीज पुट योर हाउस इन ऑर्डर. If your revenues and expenditures meet, you don't need to go to the banks to borrow. And if you don't have to go in this quantum to go borrow, banks will behave. So इसलिए ये कहना कि जी वो ऊपर हो गया, policy rate regime ये हो गई फलान. Look at the root cause. Why don't you look at the root cause, which is the fiscal discipline, which has to come in the government. And then you can talk about, the crowding out or not crowding out. But in any case, देखिए हमारे लिहाज से financial inclusion, I think that is absolutely critical. And I'm very happy to say from HBL's perspective, हमें 70 साल लगे 2018 तक to get to a client base of 12 million. Alhamdulillah, we closed at 36 million at the end of September, and this is all about digital. Because देखें digital की यहाँ बात हुई होगी आपकी सारी. Digital is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. It's cheaper, faster, better. And that's what, the banks need to think through, and I do think the industry is actually already moving in that direction. We welcome the new digital licenses which have been provided by the State Bank. Come one, come all. इसमें तो जितने लोग आएं और जितनी financial inclusion हो सके, तो अगर 36 million है, we want to go to 60 million, we would still be banking 1/4 of the country's population. There's still much more to do around what we have to do. Agriculture की बात हुई है, उसमें obviously यहाँ reverse gear लगा है. उसमें हमने again from HBL perspective we are very fortunate कि State Bank of Pakistan और SECP ने हमें license दिया है कि हमने 2 हफ्ते पहले we have created a fully owned 100% owned subsidiary called HBL Zarai Services Limited. इसमें हम सब non-financial जो services हैं, agronomy है, mechanized service है, उसमें हम वहाँ से provide करेंगे, especially focused on small farmers. Zafar Khan साहब यहाँ बैठे हैं. I'm very privileged that he is accepted to be a board member on that. तो देखिए again on the agriculture side जितने भी banks इसमें आ चुके हैं. SME की बात हो रही है. देखें हमारा बैंकों का मसला रहा है, और वो बात दुरुस्त कह रहे हैं जो भी कह रहे हैं कि whenever we talk about lending, especially in the SME space, we take collateral. कि अपना घर गिरवी रख दो, अपनी गाड़ी गिरवी रख दो, कुछ गिरवी रख दो. लेकिन a lot of banks have now started moving towards cash flow lending, ताकि हम supply chains को समझें. मुश्किल काम है, किसी का घर गिरवी रखवाना तो बहुत आसान काम है, लेकिन वो कैश फ्लो को समझना, उस कैश फ्लो के लिहाज से उसकी lending करना. So I think a lot of banks are already moving in that direction. Exports की बात हुई है. On the textile side, I think we are going to be range bound, and we are going to be range bound because of the dependence on energy. And energy is not a short-term issue. लेकिन जो भी हमने स्पेशली हॉजरी साइड पे, मैं टेक्सटाइल्स की ज़रूर बात करूँगा. आई वाज एट अ फैक्ट्री इन फैसलाबाद अ वीक बैक, और वहाँ हम वैल्यू ऐड में बिल्कुल गए हैं, लेकिन इट विल रिमेन रेंज बाउंड. जहाँ तक माइनिंग और एग्रीकल्चर की बात है, अंडर द SIFC अम्ब्रेला इंशाल्लाह 4 से 5 साल में ह्यूज अपसाइड, बट इट हैज़ अ जेस्टेशन पीरियड. जो अगर उमर सैफ साहब आपकी ये कॉन्फ्रेंस में आए थे तो उन्होंने बात की होगी कि जो टेक्नोलॉजी है और उसमें जो अपसाइड है इन द नेक्स्ट ईयर एंड हाफ इज ह्यूज. एंड देयरफॉर वी हैव कोलैबोरेटेड विद पाशा टू मेक पाकिस्तान अ टेक डेस्टिनेशन ऑन दैट साइड. बैंकों का जहां तक ताल्लुक है, उसमें अगेन द कंपनीज दैट वी कैन रिविटलाइज. देखिए, द कंपनीज कैन गो अप एंड डाउन. कंट्री के साइकिल्स आते हैं, सेक्टोरल साइकिल्स आते हैं, और इश्यूज आते हैं, बट वी हैव टू स्टे विद आवर क्लाइंट्स थ्रू द साइकिल. पिछले हफ्ते हमने चुनाव की रिस्ट्रक्चरिंग के में हम मौजूद थे, एंड आई थिंक दैट्स फैंटास्टिक. 5,500 jobs have been now restored because one company has been restructured. जब हम बात करते हैं एम्प्लॉयमेंट की इस मुल्क में, तो अगर बैंक्स स्टेप अप, if banks step up, and we are stepping up, that's where you can create that impact. मैं 2 आखिरी बातें कहूँगा क्योंकि 31 सेकंड रह गए हैं, and I want to stay within the time period. The reason I was in China was we signed a strategic agreement with Bank of China yesterday in Beijing, और उसका मकसद ये है कि जो फेज़ 2 आ रहा है CPEC का, inshallah with this caretaker government and the new elected government, उसमें is about monetization of the infrastructure which was created in CPEC phase 1. It's about agriculture, it's about technology, it's about special economic zones, and we want to learn from Bank of China. It's the second largest bank in China and the 4th largest bank in the world, and we are hugely privileged कि they chose HBL as a partner. उसका मकसद ये है कि जो CPEC phase 2 है, उसमें we actually play our due role as we go forward. And the last thing is sustainability. देखिए, मुझे हमारे clients भी बहुत मेरे से नाराज़ हैं, और हमारी investment banking team भी हमारे से बहुत नाराज़ है कि we said no new coal, but we have set our goal to be net zero by 2030. And I think we all have to play our role in terms of this sustainability and the climate financing agenda, and we have to walk the talk. सिर्फ principle sign करने से बात नहीं बनेगी. All of us, including the banks, have to move in that direction as we go forward. Asfar, once again, I'm very grateful to you for the partnership जो आपने हमें offer की. All the thought leaders who are here, the delegates who have traveled from outside the country. It's a huge thing for us that you have traveled to Pakistan to actually see the situation on ground here in the country, because the reality is we are all very clear that the country is inshallah going to go places, and it's the private sector which is going to lead this country out of this, and therefore your presence here helps the private sector to keep that faith and have your support as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Charter of Business and Charter of Economy, I think that's what Aurangzeb Saab was focusing on. We do need them, and this is something so crucial. And of course, putting the house in order. I think that's the line we all need to work with. Thank you so much. We now have General Zubair Mahmood Hayat, Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee 2016 to 2019, for his takeaway on the big picture. A hearteningly rich experience of 43 years in the service. He stands as one of the most foremost voices in the domains of peace, security, and Defense. He is also a recipient of Humanities Gold Medal, Master Gunner Award, and Master Warfighter Award. Decorated with Nishan-e-Imtiaz Military, Hilal-e-Imtiaz Military, he is also a recipient of the Legion of Merit of Turkey, King Abdulaziz Medal of Excellence, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Honor of Defense Staff, Italy. General Zubair Hayat, ladies and gentlemen.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Nutshell Group, Asfar. This is the 7th edition, and 7th is a lucky number. I've been coming to this, I think, from the very first or second part of this Future Summit. It's always been a delightful pleasure to come. Not only because of those who come and attend it and sit here, like I do and others do on the stage, but more importantly, the feel of the people who come and attend that for the purpose of both learning and contributing. So once again, thank you for organizing such a brilliant thing. You see, the big picture after 2.5 days of your deliberations is quite clear. And I need not spend my great part of my energy in trying to define the big picture. I think every aspect of that has been covered. Jack Ma had said that if you think today is difficult, tomorrow will be more difficult. It will be the day after tomorrow that there will be sunshine. So I think when you look at the big picture, we should not be looking at today or tomorrow. There are difficulties, we know the challenges. It is the sunshine that we must look at. And that, to me, will encompass the big picture. Now, in my 43 years of military service, and I'm a retired man, and therefore I speak on my personal behalf, I've got no official capacity to speak. I have traveled across the width and breadth of this country, down to every conceivable place that you might think like. And to me, the greatest challenge that I found in these years was the disconnect between the state and the people. If you remove this disconnect between the state and the people, every single challenge that has been spoken here will be addressed. You see, I regularly now lecture about 7 to 10 times a month probably. And there's probably no 5-star hotel in Pakistan that I have not gone to and delivered a lecture. But believe me, there is a dead disconnect between these 5-star hotels and our talks, and talks on the tea stalls and dhabas of Sakrand, Nawab Shah, Dera Ghazi Khan, Dera Ismail Khan, Dera Bukti, and those places. This is a country of 240 million people. It is not a country of few elites. I was speaking to somebody who was hiring people from Pakistan, somebody from UK. And he said, I hired 22 people from this country. And he said, General Zubair, you know who were the best amongst those 22? He said, there was a girl from University of Haripur. And there was a boy from University of Gujarat. May I ask any one of us, including me, how many of us would have sent our boys or girls to University of Haripur or to University of Gujarat? We won't. So therefore, it's not the trust deficit which is the biggest impediment to the big picture. The biggest impediment to the big picture is the imagination, is the deficit of imagination. if you imagine Pakistan from the prism of elite, or if you imagine Pakistan from a prism of status quo, there will never be a big picture for Pakistan. The big picture for Pakistan lies in the hearts and minds of the people of Pakistan. And I think Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah had very rightly understood that, and therefore he directly connected to the people of Pakistan. And you saw the miracle that he generated in 7 years in creation of Pakistan. And therefore, this deficit of imagination is compounded by a deficit of sincerity. You see, at individual levels, at our corporate levels, I can give you success stories upon success stories so wonderful that they are actually making all of us proud. And I have a list of them, and I keep a record of them, because I want to keep myself, and I want to keep my children, and I want to keep my future generations positive and inspired. But you cannot have a big picture by having these bubbles of excellence in a sea of mediocrity and dirt. What you basically require is sincerity of thought, sincerity of purpose, sincerity of delivering. No dearth of ideas, no dearth of policies, no dearth of data. It's all there. But ability to bring that into action so that it benefits the collective Pakistan, of which the children, of which the women of Pakistan, of which the young men of Pakistan are all a contributing factor. You see, this is a very difficult time, not only for Pakistan, it's a very difficult time globally. There are hot wars which are going on in the world. You see, I'm a graduate of Camberley, United Kingdom, and I was there 30 years ago. And I remember a talk there by some very eminent speaker who said, you see, you people, and he almost pointed us towards us, the brown, the black. He said, you people are mad. You see, we have buried wars. There will never be a war in Europe again. I want to find that man again and tell him that there is a war in Europe again taking place at this moment in Ukraine. You see, after the Gulf War, I know many United States top people. They said anytime if people think of a war in Middle East now, they should be taken to mental asylum. Well, there is a war in Middle East going on at this moment, and I want to find out where that mental asylum is, and I want to take some of those people, sit with them and have a cup of tea with them in that mental asylum. There are more IDPs. IDPs are people who have been forced to leave. There are 71 million IDPs in this world at this moment. There are more refugees. There are 120 million refugees in this world that we think is the most advanced civilization that we have created for ourselves. And in this picture, we have IDPs, we have refugees. There is more hunger. 345 million people are in acute hunger in this part of the world. And even in South Asia, India has a greater hunger index than Pakistan. And if that would not have been, Modi has just announced that he will give cash for food to those hungry people, 800 million people. 800 million people in India alone he will give. That's more than the combined population of Europe and United States. That's the big picture. So in this big picture, what you require, principally speaking, from that national imagination is national ownership. Why do I take care of myself? Why do I take care of my health? Why do I take care of my wife and my children? Because I have ownership of them. I believe in their destiny. I want to contribute towards their growth. Why can't I display the same ownership for my country? Kennedy had said, ask not what your country can do for you, but tell us what you can do for your country. That to me will complete the big picture. And in doing so, we can't move in incremental steps. That will not do the job. We can't take baby steps. The world is moving at a rapid pace, at a lightning pace. We will stand nowhere. We require leaps. And at times we require to take leaps of faith. And one single leap that we require is a national technological reorientation. National technological reorientation. Because it is only through that national technological reorientation that we can create a human momentum, a national momentum. That is the key. If you want centers of excellence, there will be many. But if you can't generate that momentum, and that momentum basically comes through, to me, a societal technological reorientation. And for that you will require a technological governance network. But you have to be real. In all the places of Pakistan that I go, I try and pay through my credit card. I fully know what will happen, and I'll give you my statistics. In 89% of the times that I have tried to pay through a credit card, they have asked for cash. Across the board, I'm just giving you a percentage. So we require a technological governance network. Obviously, for that we require trust. We also require a technological, educational, economic framework. You see, one of the biggest investment that this nation has done, unlike what is the popular perception, today you spend more money collectively on nation, on education than you spent on defense. Please go and research this out. How much of money gets spent on education? There is not a place in Pakistan where you will not find a government educational school. The infrastructure is there at every level. But what is not there? There is no teacher there. My child does not want to go to a rural area and serve the people. No, that's not the case. There is no teacher. If there is infrastructure, there is no teacher, where are you going? And therefore, when I talk about technical education system, this is a higher level. Why can't every university in Pakistan, and there are now close to 240 universities in Pakistan. You know how many universities in Pakistan? When Pakistan came into being 75 years ago, one university. One. In whole of Pakistan, then West Pakistan. Today there are over 240 universities. Why can't it be made compulsory for every Pakistani university student to earn his graded grades and go out and teach the rest of Pakistan if we have to go through that technological leap? That's the only way forward. He and she should take pride in being able to contribute. Not that they earn their degree from Pakistan and then they find green pastures abroad. Are these universities producing people for Pakistan, or are they producing people to work abroad? I'm not against people going abroad. They are our asset. But they are asset also for us. So why don't they go to Naukundi or Dalbadin or other places in Pakistan to be able to contribute? And in order to do that, you need to be able to create that big picture, incentivize and not use the hard stick for incorporating technology, for incorporating new businesses, for creating new innovations. Because in my experience, incentivizing a person, a human being, is the biggest one single thing that you can do, because it will activate him. And if you can activate the soul of a person, believe me, there's no bigger atom bomb that you can actually explode. And finally, you need to create an enabling human resource environment. So therefore, the three things that I leave behind for the future, big picture, is policy, human resource, and technology. I thank you for a patient hearing.
Thank you so much, General Sahab. So we were talking about a national momentum, and that is what is going to carry us forward. And we were talking about tech reorientation, but above all, we were talking about incentivizing the youth to be more productive, to not leave Pakistan immediately before experimenting. And we're not talking about just metropolis or big cities, we are talking about smaller cities, different opportunities, and enabling environment for us to experience the pleasures of Pakistan, and of course becoming part of its glorious future. I would now like to request our CEO and founder, Nutshell Group, Mohammad Asfar Ehsan, for his vote of thanks.
Thank you, Shah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now this is the closing session for the 7th edition of our Future Summit. I want to share only one thought with all of you. That world is like a stage. Trust me. We came here, but we will leave from here. 40 years, 50 years, 70 years, 80 years. Everywhere we are hosting this summit. Yesterday we started with 1,000 gathering, and today we are living from here. Tomorrow there will be another crowd here with another stage. So this is the most relevant quote, world is like a stage. Now this is up to us actually, what we are doing here for our society, for our city, for our country, and for humanity. This is practically up to us. And as far as Pakistan is concerned, yesterday during my welcome address I mentioned many points. This is genuinely a land of opportunities. It's up to us how we connect and how we collaborate for the prosperity of Pakistan. Here we discuss about investment and business climate in the last session. I want to touch only one point. That with ad hoc policies, the short-term policies, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, we can't progress. This is a country of 250 million, and we need a policy for investment and economy for 20-25 years. And I mentioned yesterday, and I'm repeating again because of some of the new participants here, that our 80-90% focus should be on our existing investors. FDI is the second thing. So this is all about Pakistan Business Council is also working. And we should create an environment for our existing investors in Pakistan, whether multinational and whether local. This is our contribution for the corporate sector of Pakistan, the Future Summit, and one leaders in Islamabad, every year in Islamabad. And I'm really grateful to all our contributors who are here with us. And I'm grateful to Habib Bank, especially the president, Mohammad Aurangzeb, and his entire team. They decided to jointly host this event on an annual basis, and I'm grateful to the management of Habib Bank. I'm also very grateful to my friend. Yesterday I paid my thanks to Farrukh, the CEO of Unity Foods, and his entire team